Doug, with that background, I keep expecting the butler to bring you tea.
She's coming in about 5 minutes with it.
Okay, good.
Just I'll have mine just black, Doug.
So what's the betting? 9:30 finish?
Yeah, shouldn't be too bad.
We lose like 10 minutes of people not unmuting themselves. I'm just saying.
It doesn't matter if you get better. If you were bad to start with, that's all you're remembered for.
The mayor doesn't have any treats this week, Gord.
Oh, were you in his office? Scoping?
I'm sitting here now.
Did you check all his drawers? You see?
Here he is. Okay, just waiting for you to give me the say-so, Amanda.
I'm just having a little trouble. It's taking a while to start streaming. I'm not quite sure why.
Okay, we'll be patient.
Okay. Okay, so it looks like we're ready to go.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, I will call this meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. and I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. I'm going to start with a roll call, if I could. Councillor Jansen.
Present.
Councillor Kobayashi.
Here.
Councillor Logan.
Present.
Councillor Baxter.
Here.
Councillor Day.
Here.
And Mayor Martin.
Present.
And I'm here as well, so that's full house. Can I get a motion to approve the near-term, long-term, and committee of the whole agenda for tonight? I bet you I've got hands somewhere. Oh, I've got lots of hands. So moved by Councillor Jansen, seconded by Councillor Baxter. Any discussion? Seeing none, any objections? Seeing none, moving right along. I'd like to get a motion to approve, to adopt the minutes of the Committee of the Whole, October 5th, 2020. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by Councillor Logan. Do I have any discussion on that? Seeing none, any objection to adopting those minutes? Seeing none, I'll declare those passed. Next, we'll move on to public participation, where I'm going to give members of the public an opportunity to present concerns or ask questions to the Committee of the Whole. At this point, I'd like to mention that comments pertaining to a matter that has been the subject of a public hearing are prohibited where the bylaws related to the matter have not been presented to Council for consideration of adoption. And the following items have been subject to a public hearing. Bylaw number 1816, retail cannabis, 310 Whale Road. bylaw number 1807, 85 Belmont Road, although I believe that's all passed. Bylaw number 1702 and 1817 Meaford Road, and bylaw 1840 retail cannabis on 310 Goldstream Avenue. Now, we did have two letters submitted we got in our package, and I know we have Kat McMicken waiting to speak. Amanda, could you let her in?
Okay, so Kat is in the meeting. To unmute yourself, Kat, please press *6 and you'll be able to speak.
Thank you very much. My name is Kat McMicken and I reside on Willett Street in Royal Bay. Good evening to Mayor, Council, and staff. My name is Kat McMicken. I am a representative of the Royal Bay Community Association, and tonight I'm calling in on behalf of the organizing committee members. This evening, we wanted to thank staff for preparing the requested reports with respect to the questions that had been presented by Council at the first and second reading for Royal Beach. As well, we would like to acknowledge the time taken by the developer, Seacliff, and representatives from Key Corp who have taken the time to further detail their intent for Royal Beach, especially the green spaces and pathways. We appreciate the communication between the developer and staff, as well as the wider community through events and pop-up open houses. Seeing staff and the developer work well together, as well as take the public's view into account, shows the community is important for both sides. The Royal Bay Community Association will take these reports and reflect on them with our members. We look forward to tonight's presentation and discussions. We continue to look forward to the public hearings so that we may all voice our opinions on the Royal Beach project. On a personal note, I would like to thank council members for their dedication and attention to detail related to Royal Beach project. I know that I can safely say that many community members are exceptionally passionate about this project, as it is quite literally right at our doorstep. Knowing that this project will be looked after with extra care and detail has given me hope that we are moving in the right direction towards establishing a world-class seaside community. Once again, thank you for taking the time and asking all the hard questions that many of us may not know to ask. To end, I would like to thank everyone involved again for taking the time to prepare these reports, as well as council for allowing me the opportunity to speak this evening. I hope that you all have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kat. I see Corporate Officer Williams has her hand up, which probably means I've misstepped here somewhere. Selena?
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. No, certainly not. I just wanted to remind you that at Committee of the Whole, we only need a mover. There's certainly no harm in receiving a seconder, but just so that you'll know, the official record of minutes will only show the mover.
Thank you very much. And I don't believe we have any more public participation.
No, we don't.
Thank you very much. Okay, then we're moving on to new business. First item is item 5.1 from Sandra Russell, the Corporate Communications Manager, on the annual vehicle census. Sandra?
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. The report is fairly straightforward on the annual vehicle census. It's one of the tactics that will support Council's strategic goal of enhancing mobility. It will help us understand vehicle habits and in particular, support development of transportation plans, how we plan for road improvements, evaluating parking requirements. So how many cars per household should help us understand how many parking spaces we need per household, those kinds of things. It'll also help us plan for people with mobility challenges, bicycle commuters, transit users, all those alternative transportation modes, and evaluate air pollution and climate impacts. So quite a broad range of impacts we can start to understand better just by having this vehicle data. So basically what the data shows us this year is that there's a small decrease in the number of vehicles registered to Colwood residents. Basically, it's holding steady over the last 5 years. What we'll do is continue to report this year over year to track the change. We can also compare to other municipalities. Their ICBC actually has data for every municipality in BC, so we could pick comparators that make the most sense given whatever the situation is. And maybe I'll just leave it there. The other thing I'll mention is we can see the number of electric vehicles registered to residents. And so that's an interesting trend to watch. Colwood's electric vehicles per capita tends to be a little bit higher than other communities. So that's a positive trend. But I'll leave it there. And if you have any questions or suggestions for how to improve this information as we continue this annual report, I'm happy to receive them.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well done again, Sandra. The one stat that would be interesting to look at, and I did some more analytics based on the numbers that you had here, but you do the number of cars per capita. I think a more useful way to look at this too, because there is a market difference. If you were to look at the number of vehicles per door, i.e. per residential home. So using the numbers that are published on our Colwood stats right now, which is around 6,500 homes, it's about 1.52 vehicles per home. So this is pertinent because later on when there's another report in here, I noticed that if you were to do straight per capita and we were to make conclusions on how many cars we'll need to house here in Royal Beach, for example, there's a market difference between using per capita and per door in the order of about 23% more if you do it on a per door basis rather than doing it on a per capita basis. So this makes a little more sense to me to do it this way. Anyways, it's a comment more than a question, Sandra.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. It's an excellent comment, and I will add that to the report and present it back to Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Martin?
Thank you. Two things I would find helpful moving forward. One would be a comparative, not only towards Langford and View Royal, but I'm specifically interested in comparatives to communities who have been successful with public transportation. And if that public transportation actually sees a decrease in the amount of cars that stay within that jurisdiction or land within that jurisdiction. So I would like to see in the future what kind of correlation that has. I don't know if that's data that staff could actually find. Is there anything along that lines? And I'll ask that through the chair to staff.
Thank you. It's not something I've seen yet. It's certainly not ICBC data, but I'm certain BC Transit would have ridership stats that we could apply to this data and see what it gives us. It's a great point.
Thank you. I see we have Mr. Borhill with his hand up. Ian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to mention that I am aware of several studies that did look at car ownership rates as it relates to the penetration of transit within communities and the usage. So staff can certainly follow up with some information taken from urban areas, potentially not in our local area, but certainly within Canada.
Thank you for that. Yeah, just perhaps I don't see any other hands. Just in closing, much like Councillor Kobayashi, I'm not sure that the cars per capita is necessarily the only metric we should be looking at. I wonder about cars per driver's license or cars per adult of driving age. Might be somewhat more relevant. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how this evolves over time. And thank you very much for your report, Ms. Russell.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, before we move to item 5.2, I'd like to invite Tunisia Averts from KeyCorp Planning to make a presentation regarding the Royal Beach items. And if that's quite likely not even close to how you pronounce her name, I do apologize in advance.
That was as close as it comes most of the time. A worthy effort. I'm just gonna have to share my screen, so 1 second.
Excuse me, Councillor Parkinson.
Yes.
Are you going to have a motion, move the motion that was presented by staff? Or is somebody going to move the motion?
Oh, I suppose we could do that, couldn't we?
Okay.
Can I get
Thank
somebody
you.
to move the 5.1 recommendation?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by Councillor Logan. Any discussion? All those in opposition? Seeing none, that passed. Thank you for that correction there, Amanda. Oh, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good evening, committee. My name is Tanisha Eberts. See, you were close. I'm the manager of planning at Keycourt Planning, presenting on behalf of Seacliff Properties for the Royal Beach development, which is arguably the most important development in the city of Colwood. My presentation will be speaking to your agenda items 5.2 through 5.5 tonight. Seacliff Properties, Keycourt Planning, and our engineering and traffic consultants are prepared to answer any questions that arise during each agenda item. The presentation will go over the following matters and end with a video. We'll go over the official community plan, the development area overview, go on to connectivity, talk about parks and open spaces, roads and parking, and then end in Area 8. Royal Beach has been identified as one of 2 primary centers in the city of Colwood designated for cultural, civic, economic, and public life. As you can see from this map from the Royal Bay Area Plan, the proposed development is not that different from what was envisioned, and some components like the amount of parks and open space and where they are located have remained largely unchanged. This is the Royal Beach portion of the Royal Bay Area Plan. I've highlighted Latoria Boulevard and Ryder Hedgestall Way for orientation. Shortly, I'll provide a high-level overview of each development area and their purpose, as well as precedents for the uses and built form for each. A more detailed overview of each development area will take place at the time of public hearing. The current OCP and land use amendments look to expand the Seaside Village land use designation and add additional density to the lands. The Seaside Village designation has been extended south along Machosen Road to respond to the expansion of the designation at Latoria South and create the Machosen Road corridor, as this is the only part of Royal Beach that can immediately respond to development across the street. The Seaside Village designation has also been extended south in the Landing neighborhood to allow for greater flexibility in the future around land uses such as future passenger ferry terminal. The proposal is substantially aligned with the Royal Bay Area Plan, which identified approximately 50 acres of parkland dedication, predominantly in the Bluffs and the Headlands neighborhoods. This conceptual rendering shows what a built-out Royal Beach could look like under the proposed zoning amendment. For reference, the brown tent currently up at Royal Beach is just above the lowest pond. That pond is located on the far side of the volleyball courts on this rendering. This helps demonstrate the substantial space between the foreshore and the waterfront property line at Royal Beach. At this time, I won't go through how the proposed landing design guidelines apply to each area, but I will note that they do apply to all the development areas in Royal Beach except for Area 3 and Area 7. Each area will be highlighted in these next slides with the blue outline, as you can see in the top left of the rendering. Area 1, Bluffs, multifamily, and mixed use. This area is where the Seaside Village designation has been expanded in order to create the Machosen Road corridor and synergy between Latoria South and Royal Beach. In this area, there will be predominantly standalone multifamily buildings, ideally with a mixed use component. This is the area where the extension of Ryder Hedgestall Way will enter Royal Beach. Standalone non-residential is not planned for this development area. Area 2, the Bluffs Commons. This area is where larger format retail uses can occur at Royal Beach. Areas 1 and 2 are the areas where there is a maximum of 6,600 meters square of non-residential uses permitted. Seacliff Properties has withdrawn the request to remove this maximum. This area is across from the Commons High Street. An additional crossing at Machosen Road is not proposed here though. Pedestrians will need to cross at the Latoria-Machosen intersection to move between the developments. Area 2 is where those pedestrians could begin a walk down to the waterfront via the Creekside Trail multi-use pathway. Area 3, the Bluffs neighborhood residential. This area is predominantly 1 and 2 family homes, as well as some multifamily. A significant portion of this development area is proposed parkland. For information today, there's about 95 linear meters between the high water mark of the Bluffs and the geotechnical build line in this area. Area 4, the shores at the landing. This area is where mixed use and multifamily development is proposed along with non-residential uses. This is the development area where a future passenger ferry terminal could be developed, as the roughly 5-story grade change here could accommodate a larger building, while having minimal impacts on the upland sightlines. No buildings taller than 6 stories can be developed in this area. Area 5, the Landing Mixed-Use Core. This area is where mixed-use development will occur, along with some standalone multifamily in the townhouse or apartment typology. Area 6, the Landing Mid-Rise. This area is where building heights can be up to 12 stories due to the siting along the base of the steep Machosen Road hill. This will be where a mixed-use area where the podium style of building could be featured. For context, only one of the 3 proposed 12-story buildings will be seen as about 3 stories from Machosen Road. The other 2 will look like a 1-story building, and one will be completely out of sight from Machosen Road. Area 7, the Headlands neighborhood. This neighborhood is a proposed single-family neighborhood with some transitional multifamily in the form of townhouses. This area will be where pedestrians could leave Royal Beach and travel north on the extension of the multi-use path towards Ocean Boulevard. Area 8, the Plaza at Royal Beach. This is the heart of Royal Beach, and this is the area in which all of Royal Bay and the Greater Victoria region will be connected to the waterfront and beach. I will be going through this area in detail later on in the presentation. So how are the development areas, parkland, and all of Royal Bay going to be connected at Royal Beach? Well, in a variety of ways. The first is most obvious is physically, at the entrance to the Creekside Trail at Machosen Road, and the extensions of both Latoria Boulevard and Ryder Hedgel Way into the site. The second is visually. Royal Beach will look like the greater community of Royal Bay by using the same light standards, incorporating public art, the same style of street furnishings, boulevard treatments, and most importantly, with the views from public spaces, including Machosen Road. Finally, Royal Beach will be mentally and emotionally connected to the existing community. We understand that the residents of Colwood and beyond already have a strong attachment to the spectacular waterfront and naturalized areas at Royal Beach. We get that the lands are already part of the greater region and Royal Bay area and want to emphasize and make that experience better by strengthening that sense of place. This is the overall connectivity map showing the entire Royal Bay area of Colwood. On this map, Machosen Road is detailed in purple, and so is the extension of Latoria Boulevard into Royal Beach. These are considered arterial roads. The other road connectivity point is the extension of Ryder Hedgel Way into Royal Beach as a collector road, which are shown in green. Royal Beach is also connected to Latoria South and lands to the north via 2 multi-use paths. One begins at the park space at the Machosen Road Latoria Boulevard and travels down Royal Beach, adjacent to the existing stormwater channel, to tie into the second multi-use path, which runs parallel to the waterfront for the majority of the Royal Beach foreshore. That waterfront multi-use pathway will connect over the city lands to the north towards Ocean Boulevard for future City of Colwood waterfront connectivity. Multi-use paths are shown in teal on this map, and the rest of the trail network is shown in dark dotted green. So here is the teal, and here is the dark green. Some other places of note are the star on the map, which is on the beach, the location of a future beach park on the foreshore lease lot. The orange wheels here and here indicate the plaza and the potential linear plaza in Area 8. Everything shaded in light green indicates the parks and open spaces at Royal Beach. The special places are marked with green stars and are extremely hard to see, but here they are. The amount and quality of the parks and open spaces at Royal Beach is what makes us a vibrant, connected to nature and world-class community. The total parkland dedication is approximately 50 acres in area and designed with a softscape, naturalized approach for both parks and the trail network. The waterfront multi-use pathways will act as a main spine and connect people to lands beyond to the north and up into Royal Bay with the Creekside Trail. The foreshore lease lots, identified as a city-initiated piece of land to rezone for future marine uses, is the perfect area for passive recreation such as volleyball and community gatherings. The parks at Royal Beach are plentiful with 10 special places that include a range of things from playgrounds to viewpoints and act as the pearls on the trail network necklace. Shouldn't write my own tongue twisters into my scripts. Please note that the request for community amenity credit for the temporary park at Royal Beach was formally withdrawn on October 14th. Seacliff Properties Senior Asset Manager Georgia is on the line and can speak to that in more detail during agenda item 5.3. The bottom left-hand picture shows an existing trail in Comox coming down from the residential area on the Bluffs to Goose Spit. This is similar to what Royal Beach will look like, particularly the Bluffs and the Headlands neighborhood parks. We know that Royal Beach is already an important destination for folks to connect with nature, walk the beach, and recreate. The intention of the parks plan is to enhance the things that are already here and provide the supporting amenities to make Royal Beach a world-class community and destination for not only Greater Victoria, but all of Vancouver Island. The left-hand side photo shows the future site for the Bluffs Amphitheatre. The top right shows the crosswalk at Latoria, which will connect into the Creekside Trail in the future. Middle right shows the Bluffs Trail, and the bottom picture shows the beach volleyball at the temporary beach park. Here we can see the parks plan more plainly. Of note is the property line dashed in red along the bottom and how much of the beach is actually off of the Royal Beach development site. The other note is the connectivity. Here you can really see how pedestrians and cyclists will be connected and move around the site conveniently and safely without having to step or pedal on a single road. And this is the red dashed line, not this. Now we will go through each neighborhood park spaces, beginning with the Bluffs. I've indicated the approximate location of each special place with a star. The special places in the Bluffs includes the Bluffs Lookout, featuring a picnic area, viewpoint, public art, and a small playground, as well as the Bluffs Amphitheatre, which will include a seating area on the grassy slope, a viewpoint, public art, and a picnic area. This slide outlines the process that has occurred and will be following in order for development and prior to any dedication in the Bluffs. To date, we have committed to annual shoreline monitoring reports, provided geotechnical testing and modeling, adopted a 2-meter sea level rise development standard, and adhered to the Green Shores Policy Directive in the OCP. Prior to any land being developed or dedicated in Area 3, we will provide a professional report outlining shoreline, geotechnical, and environmental works that need to be done and adhere to all government standards and best practices at the time of application. Moving on to the Landing neighborhood, we have 4 special places here, including the Metchosin Connection, known as the Creekside Trail, a naturalized park space near the ponds, the launch area, which will feature paragliding launch pad, outdoor fitness equipment, and a lawn area for outdoor activities like fitness classes. And the Landing will have the Village Plaza, which is an urban gathering space with seating, public art, and washroom facilities. This plaza will connect to the waterfront via the social stairs down to the beach park area. Speaking of the beach park, it will have opportunities for pop-up recreational rentals like kayaks and paddleboards, be a gathering space for community events like farmers markets, and have 2 volleyball courts, as well as that enhanced connection with the waterfront multi-use pathway. In the Headlands, we see the last 2 special places, the Metchosin Bank Lookout, which will be a viewpoint with a seating area, and the Headlands Park, which will be a viewpoint, seating area, and have a small playground. The next series of slides shows how Royal Beach looks and is used today and how it will look and feel in the future, beginning with the Creekside Trail. Don't mind the fog. As you can see, the Creekside Trail and Ponds Park areas are quite expansive and lead to the heart of the Landing and waterfront. Here's the existing waterfront multi-use pathway looking north towards Ocean Boulevard and Esquimalt Lagoon. This is what that is envisioned to look like in the future. Note the ground floor of any building within 18 meters of the waterfront property line cannot have any office uses to encourage an active and vibrant waterfront area. The waterfront multi-use path is a main connector for north-south travel along the site. We see that today. Here's how that could look in the future. Roads and parking are crucial infrastructure. This map shows more clearly the main intersections at Royal Beach, Metchosin and Latoria Boulevard, and Metchosin Road and Ryder Hedgestill Way. It's a bit easier to see here, so I'll also touch on the park connections beginning with the beginning of the Creekside Trail, the Village Plaza, and the extension to lands beyond at the north of the site. Remember that purple indicates arterial roads, green indicates collectors, and orange indicates local roads. There will be a transit loop. The blue box is indicated are proposed stop locations. The extension of Latoria Boulevard will have two standards, an upper and a lower standard. Both include provisions for 4-meter wide sidewalk. The lower standard begins as you move into the landing, roughly around Area 8's new border. The lower piece of Latoria will include angled parking on either side of the road, supplying an ample amount of on-street parking above and beyond the parking that is required for the residential, non-residential, and park uses in that area. This way, residents and visitors will be able to drive down Latoria and enjoy the high street and the beach by conveniently parking on the street in the heart of the development. The neighborhood local and collector roads echo those from Latoria South in design. All internal roads at Royal Beach will include on-street parking where achievable. For collector roads, one-way bike lanes will be provided on either side of the road. As Royal Beach is quite sloped, the grade will ultimately determine how each portion of road will need to be configured. Development Area 8 is indicated here with a thick blue outline. I've also indicated the Creekside Trail entrance and the location of the plaza. Area 8 is now approximately 3 hectares in size, includes 4-meter wide sidewalks and angled parking on either side of the road, has 3 statutory right-of-ways to guarantee public access to the waterfront, and a limit on size for ground floor non-residential uses, excluding brew houses and eating and drinking establishments because nobody wants a small pub. This is also the area where no office uses are permitted within 18 meters of the waterfront property line. The foreshore length of Area 8 is 205 meters. Here we have zoomed in on that area. On the site plan, you can see the SRWs are indicated with blue arrows. And below that are some precedents for the sidewalk width and the angled parking. This artist's rendering of the plaza and lower Latoria Boulevard demonstrates how all of these components may look and feel. The buildings step back from the waterfront, the boulevard is ample, a wide plaza frames the City of Victoria view, the buildings directly adjacent spilling activity out into the public space. Overall, the area has a human scale with a high quality urban design. This is planned to be a sticky place, the heart of the landing neighborhood, and hopefully Royal Bay in general. These precedents show that urban design and built form further. Of note is the top right-hand precedent, which is the Seacliff Properties development. This building steps appropriately from the waterfront while still feeling modern and sleek. The artist's rendering shows the grade change between the plaza and the beach with the social stairs on the right-hand side. Of course, restaurants can't be the sole business type in areas like this, so a mixed-use building with a ground floor pharmacy is also shown. Overall, you can see that Area 8 will be dynamic and engaging. So why not drive that home with one final group of precedents? Here we see the Tudor House liquor store on the top right, activity spilling into Olympic Plaza in the middle right, and further examples of mixed use and human scale buildings throughout the rest. That concludes our presentation. Thank you. Seacliff Properties and the development team look forward to the public hearing and working with the City of Colwood to make this world-class community a reality. I'm now going to switch screens to share the video, so please be patient with me for a moment.
Royal Beach. The community is already here. Royal Beach is already a destination for recreation, tourism, and community gathering. The new Seaside Village will offer even more amenities, parks, and open spaces, with the promise to be a vibrant, flourishing, bike lanes and angled parking in the heart of the landing neighborhood. This road will take residents where they want to go. Trails will be another important point of connection to Royal Beach. The Creekside Trail will be a multi-use pathway, creating a wide open space that leads people down to the waterfront. Other trails will connect to 10 special places and parks sidewalks outlined in the Royal Beach Parks plan, but they'll also connect to other trails in Colwood, such as Ocean Boulevard and the Meadow Park Greenway. When people arrive at Royal Beach, they'll find local shops, restaurants, parks, and residential spaces that are at the heart of Colwood. Area 8 and the landing neighborhood in general will be the hub of all of Royal Bay, stitching together the surrounding neighborhoods and connecting them to the waterfront and lands beyond, as envisioned in the Colwood official community plan. With its world-class waterfront and incredible public amenities, this area will also be a destination for the whole capital region and visitors to the island. Royal Beach's design will echo the surrounding community to make a strong visual connection. Light posts and boulevard planting currently seen in Royal Bay will be continued down into Royal Beach. The Headlands neighborhood is designed to blend well with the existing single-family development to the north. And finally, the mixed-use commercial space at the top of the Bluffs will create cohesion on the chosen road and integrate well with the commercial area across the way in Latoria South. So how do we know that Royal Beach will become a community, citywide, and regional destination? Because it already is. This summer, Royal Beach hosted a wide variety of events and welcomed visitors, vendors, and participants from all over the Lower Island. More than 4,000 people visited Royal Beach this summer for scheduled events and pop-ups, in addition to the countless community members who frequent the area for its playground and the waterfront. The events highlighted how the Royal Beach development will enhance this already important spot in our community and provide valuable connections. The Sunset Markets, for example, brought vendors from the Chosen, Victoria, and even Saanich and offered insight into future commercial opportunities along the High Street, Area 8, and throughout Royal Beach. Spinco by the Sea provided an opportunity for a local business to welcome riders from all corners of Greater Victoria and the West Shore. And it's easy to imagine this kind of activity in a permanent structure as the development takes shape. Paddle sports pop-ups connected people directly to the water. It's clear that Royal Beach will be a destination defined by its oceanfront location, and water rentals will continue as the new community develops. Drive-in movies turned Royal Beach into an entertainment destination for all of Greater Victoria and the western communities. And it isn't hard to imagine similar events happening either in the commercial areas of Royal Beach, or perhaps in a new amphitheater designed to host arts and cultural events. And of course, at every event, food trucks and vendors gave us a taste of what a seaside restaurant or pub will look like at Royal Beach. It's difficult to imagine a more beautiful place to have a pint and enjoy the views. As Royal Beach develops into a seaside village, it will be a hub for commercial and residential growth. It will be a connected community, supportive of transit, walking, and cycling that's easy to get to and easy to spend the time in. It will be an outstanding public realm that connects diverse activities to the waterfront. And it will be characterized by green spaces and defined by its seaside setting, ocean views, and access to the water. The community is already connected to Royal Beach. Let's build on that momentum.
And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much, Tanisha. Yeah, I think perhaps we'll just dive right into the reports now. I think that's background information. If there's questions, I know we have a whole gaggle of people here from Key Corp and Seacliff Properties. So if there's questions, I think we have lots of people ready and willing to answer them. So the first, then on 5.2, I'd like to ask Helen Lockhart, the Technical Supervisor Engineer, to talk about Royal Beach servicing. Helen? Oh, excuse me, just a minute. Councillor Baxter's got his hand up. Michael, how may I help?
My apologies. I thought it was we were going to speak to this report, but if you want to carry straight on to the other reports, that's fine.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just share, oops. I'll share the screen with you. Okay. So So the first service that I'll talk about is the water supply. And with the higher density, On Point has calculated that there is adequate water supply and water pressures to service this development through 2 pressure reducing valve stations. And if the development does need additional water supply, they will be able to connect directly into the supply main on Machosen Road. And at each stage of the development, we will be making sure that there is adequate domestic flows and fire protection flows for each stage of the development. So for sanitary sewer servicing, all of the servicing is expected to be by gravity flow to 1 lift station at the low point of the development. There were some questions about whether it might make sense to abandon the large lift station on Machosen Road and combine it with this lift station for 1 large lift station. On Point did some very high level comparison of operating costs to do this, and they found that it would take a lot more electricity to run just 1 large lift station at the lower point rather than having 2 separate lift stations. And they also did not take into account the fact that there is an existing smaller lift station on Machosen Road. So if the large lift station is relocated into Royal Beach, the lower lift station, the smaller lift station would have to be upgraded as well, all the way up to Latoria Boulevard. And the Royal Beach area was calculated to have an allocation of 21.2 liters per second for sewage flows. And On Point has calculated that the maximum sewage flow due to increased density may be up to around 65 liters per second. So the developer will need to measure the flows at each stage in development. And when they do exceed the 21.2 liters per second of their allocation, they will have to start paying for enhancement fees. And for the master drainage, all of the drainage is also expected to flow by gravity to the central channel and then be discharged to the shoreline pond and then to the waterfront. There may be a couple of crossings of the channel in the future, and at that time, the detailed designs will be determined, but they haven't been determined at this point. So, and I don't have slides, but for BC Hydro, they don't have quite the electrical capacity needed for this development. So the developer will have to work with them to ensure that there is enough. And for telecommunications in Fortis, BC, those utilities have confirmed that they have adequate capacity to service the Royal Beach development. So the recommendation is that this report titled Royal Beach Servicing be received. And are there any questions?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I have a couple of hands up. I think probably what I'd like to do is just give everybody a chance to comment on each of these reports in turn. And then after everybody's had one chance, I'll look for a motion or a recommendation. And as I said, we have Helen and others here ready to answer any questions. So if I could start with Mayor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I have to ask the question because it just needs to be asked. And I just need to hear the answer just once. We are confident where we are placing the lift station that the 100-year, whatever it is, that we will not need to move that lift station. I do not want to be in a similar situation of what we are at the bottom of Ocean Boulevard with the lift station there. So we have complete confidence that that is the right place to be putting that lift station, and it shouldn't cause any issues where it would need to be moved.
Yeah.
Ellen, you want to take that one?
Yeah, well, we'll be, this schematic concept drawing doesn't have the exact location, but that is something that we will be asking of the designer to ensure that we will not have the same problem that we have with the Ocean Boulevard pump station, that it will be set back far enough so that it won't have to be relocated within 100 years with the knowledge that we have now of sea level rise.
Excellent, thank you. And just in regards to hydro, and I know we're talking about Royal Beach, and so I do apologize if I'm mixing apples and oranges, but is Latoria South and Royal Bay needing hydro as they continue to grow out as well? Will this be a cooperative thing between the two developers, or is this only for this development?
Your worship, if I may answer that through the chair. This is Brent Molnar speaking on behalf of some of the servicing needs. And excuse me, Helen, for cutting in. Hydro looks at what's considered a front-ender agreement for the participating players and will balance those loads out relevant to their costs to the mainline extension. Frankly, the city's not involved in how BC Hydro apportions those costs, but they do apportion it relevant to each development's driven density and driven load calculations. So this is part of a project that started with BC Hydro over a year and a half ago that Gablecraft has been well funding up until now. And now that Royal Beach is coming online, they will be a participant in that funding mechanism, but the details as to how it's spread apart, I can't speak to.
Okay, thank you. That's all I need. Thank you. And that's all my questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. Councillor Baxter. And if you're talking, you're still muted.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just want to say that I was really happy to see the presentation from the developer in that it gives us a better picture of what the development could look like in terms of heights of buildings and types of buildings and where they are. Gives me a better idea of relative sizes of areas than I had before. So I was really happy to see that. I'm a bit baffled by why we would be constructing a bylaw that prevents drinking establishments down there. And I'll speak to that when we get to the bylaw, because I think there's a simple fix for that. Very, very minor change should fix that. In regards to the report on servicing, I just wonder, are there any controls proposed for the appearance, the outward appearance of the pump station? And if so, in what document will those be?
I see Mr. Carlson's hand up. Maybe Dennis, you'd be the best to answer that.
Actually, through the chair, Councillor Parkinson, it's Brent speaking. At this time, there are no considerations or provisions or control brought into the rezoning statements that you see before you tonight. However, it is a factor of the development agreement where we will bring the principles of the built form context and same as the development permit guidelines to the function of that pump station. There was a high degree of design element to the existing Royal Bay pump station that we look to parallel in this area to suit the built form intent.
Thank you, Mr. Molnar. No more questions.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Day.
Thank you. It was a very good walkthrough of the proposal by Royal Bay, but it doesn't show anywhere that I could see what appears to be required by Thurber to deal with the settling ponds, which basically the entire site has previously had settling ponds on it, and there are various dikes holding them in place, which are forecast to be a problem, a serious environmental problem in the future. And the recommendation was that a very large, like in the order of 40 meters tall wall will have to be built to shore up that material that otherwise may end up on the beach or in the ocean. So I'm just wondering, in the proponents' slideshow, I didn't see anything that would indicate those big dominoes that are being recommended.
Okay, perhaps Dennis Carlson would like to answer that one.
Chair, to Councillor Day's question, that necessity will be covered as part of our presentation when we come to the Parks Terms of Reference, but it will speak specifically regarding the measures that will have to be undertaken in the Bluffs.
Thank you very much.
So there are other areas as well, and how does that impact what we just saw presented by the developer?
So through the chair to Councillor Day, so as we work through the development of this site in more detail, those issues will be explored further, and we'll be looking at how to best deal with them. So at this point, we're just looking at the conceptual level. And as I said, as we work through it more detail with the developer, those are the sort of issues that we will be developing solutions for.
Okay, that does not answer my question, unfortunately, because the plan that we've just seen the pictures of, as far as I can tell, cannot exist with what Thurber is saying is necessary to make it stable.
Perhaps Mr. Earl, I see his hand is up, would like to chime in on this one.
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. I believe Seacliff is firmly aware of the recommendations of the Thurber report. The Thurber report is attached and forms part of the Parks report that's in the package this evening. Within the Thurber report, there are two sections, sections 2 and section 3. Both of those happen to be in the Bluffs, where Thurber is recommending that ground improvements will need to be put in place as part of development in that area. As referenced in the Seacliff's slideshow, they did reference that requirement, and that requirement will form eventually part of the development agreement should this proposal move forward. And outside of sections 2 and 3, as recommended in the Thurber report, there aren't ground improvements that are recommended relative to hold back silts as you've described. And so from administration's perspective, the Thurber report is attached in the Parks report. Seacliff is aware of their obligations with respect to moving forward with the recommendations of that report, and some more detail will be discussed in the Park section. I think that answers your question.
If I might just interrupt, Mr. Earl, I think you said that sections 2 and 3 were where parks, where ground improvement was required. I think it's quite likely that between those two sections and perhaps extending either side of them, ground improvement will be required. Isn't that the understanding?
Sorry, thank you. That is correct. And it's administration's perspective that the bulk of those lands are in the Bluffs area. And so that's why we're referencing it in the Bluffs section.
Thank you. Councillor Day?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't feel very comforted by that, because I have a long history of walking the site, and I'm very concerned that we're accepting a proposal that doesn't really address the stability, and there's a large amount. In fact, the maps were very difficult to read Quite a few of the diagrams that were included with our package, I used both an online version so that I could enlarge them, but I also even had to use a magnifying glass to look more carefully to make sure that I understood which part we're talking about. And there's a division, there's actually 6 points that Thurber looked at. 3 of them are visible, and 3, it's very difficult to tell exactly where they're being looked at. So I do have significant concerns about whether or not what we've just seen is achievable once we talk about the seismic concerns. But the other thing that jumped out at me, and I'm just going to move on because I don't want to take too much time here, is about the sewer. Because the maps that identify where the anticipated issues are shows quite a few areas all the way to Colwood Corners that will require significant upgrades. It's not that they're, maybe marginal. They're actually 3 categories, one being the worst, where we're actually going to see sewage bubbling up out of manholes, and 2 others where we're simply going to bump up against capacity issues. And it hasn't really been fleshed out what the costs are or who will be paying for those costs. So I wonder if staff can tell us what the anticipated cost would be and who would pay.
Through the chair, this is Brent Molnar speaking. We have not yet figured out what all the full costs would be. That'll be something that we work out as the development proceeds and gains confidence in its ability to proceed. In terms of the construction of the pump station, the design and install of the necessary pumps and services and electronics that be necessary to serve those lands, they are the developer's responsibility to size appropriately. Capacity improvements to the existing system would be considered enhancement to the existing works. So enlargement of the existing Royal Bay pump station, enlargement of the pipes off-site that are forming part of the city's existing infrastructure are part of our enhancement, which we collect fees and charges with at the time of subdivision. So while these properties are exempt from the enhancement provisions, the city has been collecting enhancement charges against the rest of the developers in the city of Colwood, outside of those that are exempted. And so we would be directly responsible for capacity upgrades. They have not yet been quantified or determined. They are in part predicated on this development moving forward. The developer will be responsible for the construction, installation, and sizing requirement of the pump station that would be necessary on their land, as well as providing the land for that pump station, as well as the siting of that pump station to hit the ultimate life cycle span as deemed appropriate by council, working through staff. Hope that answers your question.
So just to follow up then, Wishart Road, Machosen Road, and parts of Colwood Corners, those sewer enlargements that are required will be on the rest of Colwood, not on this development?
No, and thank you. Sorry, through the chair, and thank you very much for that clarity. As Mrs. Lockhart advised in her report, this development, same with Gablecraft's development to Royal Bay South and North, have set capacity as defined by their existing contribution to the system. That's, I'm going to summarize, around 21.3 liters per second. Once this development exceeds that capacity as inserted into the pump station, they will be responsible, or 21.2, sorry, they will be responsible for paying the enhancement fee for all those works there and above. So the rest of the developers in the city of Colwood will not be paid, will not be forced to pay enhancement charges relevant to this density or this achievement. This development, as with Gablecraft South, pays for anything over above their previously paid allotment. We plan to monitor through the aspect of the development agreement the flows in and out of the pump station and make this developer responsible for the continuing of the monitoring up until they hit their capacity threshold and limits.
Great, thank you. My last point is really about the water detention pond on the beach. The present detention pond, I believe, requires remediation, and I haven't seen anything in the report or in the presentation about a new pond being built or enhancements being made to the water system to filter the water before it reaches the ocean.
Through the chair, thank you very much, Councillor Day, for that question. Again, this is Brent speaking. We haven't worked out all the details, and through the presentation that was provided for the developer, they admitted that there would be some ground stabilization techniques that were brought in. When we review later on this evening, the park's terms of reference report, it will identify some of the need to stabilize that area, as well as the developer's intent to build stormwater ponds that will help purify and cleanse the water throughout the history of time. So that pond will eventually be ground stabilized and improved with auxiliary storm drainage treatments. To say that I have details on that would be erroneous. We'll be working through that as a factor of the development agreement as the development goes forward. But prior to the transfer of that area of land, those would have to be figured out and paid for and constructed by the developer, or a terms and agreement satisfactorily reached between the mutual parties.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. All my questions been asked, actually. I just have one, though, and that is, it has to do with just from a 40,000-foot viewpoint here. You know, we have a contract with an agreement with the CRD as far as what our sewage output would be when we connect it to their system, which goes out to the sewage treatment plant. So with all these developments, and no one's ever adequately answered this question. So we've got the 2850 residents we'll put in here. We got Royal Bay, we got Olympic View. Like, where are we now? Like, are we going to be out of capacity before we even reach what we originally planned on? Like, I don't know. Does someone have that big picture? Helen, do you have that number? Is someone tracking this? That's my question. Thank you.
Well, through the chair, we are planning a sewer master plan update this year, which will include sewer monitoring to see exactly where we are in relation to the new allocation that we have with the CRD flow capacity. And I believe with the CRD, they are also going to be charging DCC costs as well for new developments, which will be for future upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant and the core area sanitary sewer system. So right now, as a guest, do you have an educated guess? Do you know where we, like, what are we at? 80% capacity after all this? 90%? So I guess the answer is you don't have an idea until you do this update, correct? Is that what I'm getting? Through the chair, we did get some flows from the CRD. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but I believe some months with high inflow and infiltration, we were quite close to the limit. So I would have to check our records to say for sure. I think that was only like an isolated case, but yeah, we'd have to check for sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Helen.
I see CAO Earl has his hand up.
Thank you, Chair Parkinson. Councillor Kobayashi, to answer your question, we currently have 18 years worth of capacity given the current pace of development. And it's our belief that we have areas of our community where we have substantial inflow and infiltration, where we can make improvements. And so the municipality is of the belief that once we identify those areas as described earlier this evening in terms of the analysis that we're doing, that we'll be able to increase that 18 years worth of capacity to a number that's higher. Right now, it's my understanding that the CRD is planning in the year 2045 to be constructing either additional capacity at the existing plant and or a new plant. And so the reality is that the city of Colwood believes that we can make improvements to our inflow and infiltration such that we could extend the current 18-year time frame of capacity up into the point where the CRD constructs additional capacity at the existing plant or a new plant in the year 2045.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Earl.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jansen. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you done, Doug?
He gave a thumbs up there.
Okay. Sorry, I had a big screen in front of me.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. A few things, I've ticked off some, but I am intrigued in the sewer issue because we have heard since we came on board here that capacity for the future is going to be an issue. So specifically for the engineering side of the shop here, any thought to encouraging or having developments put in some storage capacity to help alleviate this in the future so that it can be stored on site and pumped out at non-peak hours? I know we have had that talk in the past.
Through the chair, this is Brent Molnar speaking. Thanks for the question, Councillor Jensen. Storage won't be our answer. It's a peak flow consideration. And while we initially considered that storage would be our answer, further review with the CRD has found it not to be so. As our CAO, Mr. Earl, has indicated, we this year started an aggressive, I'm going to say, I&I investigation where we're video inspecting our pipes so we can understand some of our inflow areas so we can control it. And as also advised, through a previous report vetted through committee, at least if not council, several months ago, we do think we've got capacity till 2043. CRD is going to start putting their DCC program into place, and at 2045, I mean, you're right, those dates don't quite work out, 2043 versus 2045, but through the changes with the plumbing code, continual investigation, we've got an active pursuit of recapturing some of our lost capacity through an I&I investigation where it exists.
Thanks, Brent. Back to the road design. I did notice the Latoria Road extension. It seemed like there was, from the pictures there, that the bikes were then joining the traveled roadway at one point, I think in the lower portion. I take it there's an off-street cycling option that is nearby or an alternative route. I'm sorry, I can't reference exactly where that came from, but it was with that first page of the road design, the end of Latoria Road. Perhaps someone can shed some light on that.
I think the lower collector, the bike lanes were removed. So somebody want to address that, either staff or from the consulting side?
Through the chair, I can address that.
I'm
pleased to say that you are leading us into a report that is going to be discussed later on tonight. Aaron Knutson, one of our engineering staff, will be leading us through the different road hierarchy on the site, and I'd be pleased to answer that question at that time if you're comfortable with it.
No, we'll table that. Thanks, Brent.
Thank you.
Also, I guess that might include my next one too, Brent, which was there was discussion around pedestrian tunnel or overpass at some point across Machosen Road. Will that come up as well?
Through the chair, not directly. And that's the best answer I can have. But I think that the opportunity for discussion is better found when we're discussing the pedestrian connectivity and the cycling connectivity through that roads report, which is 2 items away in the agenda.
Okay, thanks. And my last one then is probably along the same lines, is Perimeter Park, a connection to Perimeter Park. I'll table that one, Brent, as well. And lastly, Mr. Chair, the settling ponds keep seeming to worm their way back into our discussions here. I mean, I take it we're not going to accept responsibility for any piece of land that we don't have a firm grasp on the engineering behind it. I guess, Brent, that's probably best answered by yourself.
Through the chair, thanks very much, Councillor Jensen, for that lead in. Very true. We have to first unveil it working with the geotechnical engineer at the time of transfer to the city, at the time of consideration of transfer to the city. It is fully intended that we understand that land area as apprised by the geotechnical engineer before taking on any responsibility for it while we're working with the developer to understand it.
All right, thanks. And I take it we're years away from that?
No, I do not think so. We spoke to the developer about front loading portions of the development, which include front loading the access road down, as well as any waterfront features, perhaps being a pub and those sort of functions. That will play into that storm consideration pretty close to the front end of a project. So it'll be one of the front lines in the development agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellent video, and there's certainly some clarity is coming forward. Things are looking a lot brighter from my perspective. I'm not going to comment on the settling ponds. I'm certainly not an engineer, and so I will defer to the consultants that are paid to look after the city's interest and staff to evaluate. My question, I guess, is in terms of the timing of the works. For sewer, water, etc. Is that density driven, or is there a trigger in terms of timing? And is there any collaboration that's needed with Royal Bay? So through you, Mr. Chair, to staff or the consultant.
I can take a front load at that. Through the chair to Councillor Logan. We anticipate the sanitary. The pump station will be right at the front end of a project. Because all of the site is lower than the service on Machosen Road or the existing pump facility on Machosen Road, that's going to have to be one of the driving factors. There is a potential that some of the leads may be possible off of Machosen Road by gravity, but we do anticipate that sewer comes first. As well as you can't apply for occupancy until you've got appropriate water. So sewer and water will be right there, as well as the ability to drain the land. I think what you're more speaking to is the timing of effect as to how this will go. And it's intended to progress with the subdivision of the land. And so the necessity to serve is coupled with an intent to subdivide. And while I don't have that fully laid out in terms of A, B, C, D, in terms of their order, the obligations exist and will be timed appropriately as such. I hope that answers your question.
You good, Gordy? Yeah.
Yeah. All
okay.
Good.
Thank you. Just for myself, good report. I think I followed it all. I do note it's a little hard to bounce back and forth with between sediment ponds and settling ponds and storm ponds, but I think I followed it all reasonably well. But the one sort of question that I have in my head is the concept of the existing storm pond being converted to a rain garden. And my rain garden knowledge is certainly outdated and wasn't never that deep, but it always struck me that they were fairly land intensive for the volume of water and expensive. I just wonder if anybody's kind of got a similar one they could point us to for reference. The amount of stormwater heading down towards the existing storm pond when the whole site is developed. My guess is it's going to be fairly significant. And I know there's a stormwater report that will come that will look into it in a little more detail. But I just wonder if there's a rain garden treating this volume of water anywhere around that just those of us that are interested could go get a feel for. Anybody got any sense of that?
Through the chair, I'd actually like to ask, Brent Muller speaking again, I'd like to ask if the developer or one of their participants is available to answer that question. Thank you.
Yep, very appropriate.
Hi there, this is Niall with KeyCorp Planning. We do have Richard Rivneris from On Point Engineers on the line as well, so he may be able to provide some insight into scope for the rain channel. At this point, though, as was mentioned by your staff, we're really not at the point where we have a detailed outline of what the overall retention scope is going to be. I will acknowledge, however, that the current SRW on the property or the Creekside ponds that we've currently shown, they're quite overbuilt as far as storm ponds go. Like there's only a few days of the year you actually see water going down. And so what we're going to try to do as the development builds out is create something that both retains and manages stormwater from the overall proposed site, and will retain stormwater from the proposed site, and at the same time provides a aesthetically pleasing amenity feature for folks as they wander from Machosen Road down towards the waterfront at the bay. So I understand I haven't addressed your question, but I do believe that based on the experience we have across the street, that the ponds, the SRW will more than adequately address rainwater, and certainly will be working to detail out a plan. And as far as precedent examples or concepts, I will endeavor to get that to you and present it at public hearing.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think that's good. Then we have in front of us a recommendation that the Committee of the Whole receive the staff report titled Royal Beach Servicing. Anybody want to make that motion? Councillor Jansen, do I have, and I don't care about a seconder anymore, Mr. Baxter, so you were too late. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, any in opposition? Oops, hang on, I got two hands up. Councillor Jansen, you want to discuss the motion? No. Councillor Baxter, did you want to discuss the motion? No, that's me not lowering all hands correctly. My apologies. Okay, then I'll call the motion. All those in opposition, please raise your hands. Seeing none, that motion passes. Next, we're going to move on to item 5.3, report from Dennis Carlson, the planner, on the Royal Beach Parks terms of reference. Dennis, you good to go?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just give me a minute here while I get set up. Right, so this presentation is regarding the parks terms of reference. Some of the things that I will be mentioning here have already been covered by the applicant, so I will attempt to be brief. This Parks and Terms of Reference came out of a council resolution February 24th that instructed that as part of the development agreement that we, together with the applicant, develop a terms of reference that would be presented for you for your consideration and a recommendation onto council. It also included a recommendation that the first phase of development would include the waterfront park and open space in the landing, and that it would also include public parking as well as a surface trail system parallel to the waterfront. Just for context, the Royal Bay plan, which is in the OCP, did establish a parks plan, which, if it looks familiar, very much is reflected by the parks plan that's being proposed by the applicant. In opinion of staff, this parks concept is in keeping with that overall Royal Bay Parks plan. As been noted, the foreshore is not part of the subject property. It is Crown lands. It partly held as a foreshore lease held by Seacliff Properties. For some additional context, and I think this was presented to committee or council, I think a few weeks ago, in terms of the draft Colwood Parks Plan, it has identified that the current inventory of parks in Colwood was approximately 1.2 hectares per thousand. And just as a point of comparison, what the applicant is proposing is significantly more than that at about 2.7 hectares per thousand. Again, comparing municipal parkland, which is everything, including neighborhood parks, parkettes, everything. The inventory currently is about 5.3 hectares per thousand, and the proposal for Royal Beach is about 3.1. Again, moving on, and Aaron will talk about this, the road standards, some more in his presentation. But basically, what I want to do here is indicate that in addition to the parks plan and the trail network that connects all these, There's also additional pathways that will form part of the road network. So there will be multiple connections between the various areas in the site and also to areas outside of the site. Now, turning to the Bluffs, which has already been a fair amount of discussion about. This is an image that was taken from a staff report that was provided to you in December of 2019, which basically outlined the potential impact to the Bluffs from shoreline erosion over time, specifically to approximately the year 2100. And it does show, as you can see, that there is slope erosion along the bluffs. Now, in discussions with the applicant and in response to council's concern about taking this on as parkland and what does that mean in terms of risk and liability, the geotech report that also accompanied the report in December did show as a way of holding back the contamination that there would be a wall constructed, which you can see on this diagram, essentially in this area here. And in discussions with the applicant, we have suggested that as a condition of the development agreement, there will be no subdivision within Area 3, which is essentially this whole area in behind the structure, until the works have been identified and constructed. So we're hoping that that will provide council some assurances that these issues will be dealt with to their satisfaction. Turning to the landing, there also are some things that staff want to point out here, largely in response to concerns expressed by council about wanting to have a better idea of what was proposed down there. And this is similar to the image that you saw in the presentation at the beginning from Tanisha. But this image, along with accompanying text, will be included in the sub-area plan. And its intention is to make it much clearer where the views and the access and the open space will be provided adjacent to the water. There, as you can see here, there will be a large plaza for the public. There will be a pathway that will work its way down the improved storm channel area, and an additional connection from the street through to the water. So multiple points of connecting through a variety of ways, as well as the water, all of which is the intention of connecting to the waterfront pathway. You will also see when Aaron provides his report is that the street will provide angled parking to provide hopefully sufficient public parking for access for people wanting to take advantage of the waterfront pathway. In terms of the waterfront itself, the foreshore has been mentioned in discussions. Council at his meeting of August 31st directed staff to prepare a bylaw to amend the zoning on the foreshore leases, which are currently zoned A1, which is basically a rural residential zone, with the intention that we would include zones in here that would allow us, the applicant, to animate the foreshore with various types of uses, be these structures or activities. Moving to the headlands, again, one of the issues we heard from council is the ability in the future to connect through from Royal Beach around the properties at the end of Ocean Boulevard, and then allow people to be able to make that connection through to Ocean Boulevard. We are in the process of discussions with the applicant about how we can work collectively on this. We recognize that there are some grade challenges, but part of what will be included as a development agreement is undertakings yet to be defined in detail how and who will be responsible for essentially making this connection. I should point out that this shaded area here is currently owned by the city. And the Ocean Boulevard right-of-way extends right to the end here. There are two houses that are located here. So part of what will require further work is how to in the best way possible, make the extension connecting through here around those houses and then to Ocean Boulevard. So lastly, in terms of the park's terms of reference, which are attached to your report, but generally they are intended to guide the development of the parks plan, which when it is developed will be brought back to Committee of the Whole for consideration and recommendation to council. It will include the estimate of the levels of service for the various park areas. It will include measures regarding slope stability, particularly in the bluffs, as I've already mentioned, more details regarding the waterfront pathway, and as usual, incorporating the user-friendly trail standards, recognizing that there are some grade challenges along here. The staff recommendation, as I mentioned, we will include in the development agreement that the works to retain sediment in the bluffs will be included and prior to any subdivision and amenities in Area 3, I should say. The other point here is regarding the amenity funds, which the applicant did make some reference to. They have withdrawn their request of the historical costs related to the temporary road and temporary park be withdrawn, but they are also asking that they have the same consideration of Latoria South, that in the future that amenity fund contributions potentially be allocated towards specific projects within the lands. That concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Once again, I think I'd like to give everybody a chance for discussion and input, and then we'll take the recommendation and move forward from there. Starting with Councillor Baxter.
This is a question directed through the chair to Mr. Carlson. On the slide labeled Headlands, which shows the red area and the yellow area, behind the two duplexes that are close to the water, there is a green area. And do you know the ownership of that green area?
No, I don't.
Because I think that's a possible route for an all-weather waterfront route, since even now in high water, it's not possible to walk past or beyond the duplexes if you leave from the pump station, simply because the water is too high. So an all-weather route might be possible back there if we can confirm the ownership. I have another question about the route from the park on the Bluffs down towards the waterfront. So at point of interest number 2, I guess it is, there's a pathway that leads off in a sort of a northeasterly direction and then goes due south and then turns due east. Is that going to need stairs, or are we able to get a bike path through there, or do we know that yet?
If I may, through the chair to Councillor Baxter, these are all the details that we will be working out together with the developer as part of the development of the parks plan, which will get into these types of issues in more detail, including options for how to connect around those two houses to Ocean Boulevard. So, and those will be coming back to committee.
Okay, if we do need stairs there, will we be seeking to get a bike trough paralleling the stairs, if that's possible? It depends what you construct, you know.
Through the chair, this is Brent Molnar speaking. As Mr. Carlson points out, we haven't worked that out, but I think that comment about the relationship of the bike continuance through that pathway is an important one, if I could be so bold as to say that. And so if councillor wishes to have bike accommodations made, if there should be a staircase, we could certainly incorporate that in there by resolution. I've also stepped away from the Zoom meeting only for a second where I can research the land area around the house. It's all considered Ocean Boulevard in the same context of Ocean Boulevard. So it's not necessarily road. However, it is Flynn Row land that's used for the purposes of road in part. It's all classified under that gross term of Ocean Boulevard as a land use. If that makes sense.
Oh, yes, it does. Thank you for that. I'm looking at the Area 8 concept drawing, which is part of this. And am I reading the right thing here? I am, part in terms of reference. And I just want to point out to people that if you look at the number of additional residential units that we're rezoning for here, just the additional, and you multiply it by the likely average purchase cost of those buildings, lots, this, just the additional piece is worth significantly more than $1 trillion. And not only that, but this is and I'm not suggesting the developer gets to take home $1 trillion in his pocket. Obviously, there's a great expense to getting there, but this is a very, very big development and a very unique development. And I think we need to work very hard to make sure it's exactly what we want, because there's no do-over on this, and there's no more land like this on the island that's going to be developed in this way. So if I look at that Area 8 concept, and knowing that it's divided into Area 8A and 8B, and only 8A, I believe, the lower 3 buildings in that drawing, only that area is guaranteed to be commercial. I just want all of us to think about that and think about whether we think that's going to be good enough for the tourists coming across on the ferry, or for the people who will drive there, or the people who will walk there. I was actually a little disturbed to see that my number of 3 hectares was adopted without any change, because I certainly don't know if that's the right number, and I didn't suggest that I did. And what it seems to say to me is that nobody else knows if that's the right number. And it suggests to me that maybe we should be seeking some impartial advice, not a big report, but just some verbal advice from somebody who's done this before somewhere in the world, or has done similar things. Because we are looking at the possibility of a ferry, and we've talked about it as a world-class development. And certainly you can't service much of the world from those 3 buildings. There may be other commercial beyond that, but there's no guarantees. I may speak to that again at council. So that's all I want to say to that, because that is in this report. And moving on to that, and bearing in mind the numbers we just talked about, I don't understand why we're not asking the developer to make the connection for, through to existing trails from the headlands. If you're doing $1 trillion worth of development, and the cost of that trail is nothing. The developer, when he does his original pro forma, will be aiming at about a 20% profit. It rarely works out that way, as I understand it. But as I understand it, they're usually satisfied with 10%, considering how many different things can go wrong, including councils asking them for more stuff. But the cost of making that connection seems like very, very little in the overall cost of the development, and yet it's a huge benefit to the area and to the development. So I will be making a motion to that effect at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Mayor Martin.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter has thrown me off a little bit with the $1 trillion number. I've never heard that number before. 1,000 billion. And so I would love to perhaps tomorrow, Councillor Baxter and I can have that conversation, because that seems like a very large number. I'm not doubting it. I don't know. I've never heard it. So it'd be fascinating.
Point of order.
That's not a point. No, excuse me. That's not a point of order. That's my opinion. I'm allowed to say those things. It's not a point of order.
Councillor Baxter may want to correct his math.
The math is pretty simple. 1,900 extra units at about $600,000-700,000 per unit.
Yeah, I think you're probably talking billions, not trillions there, Michael, if I do it quickly on the side of the desk here. But anyway, let's not get into that. Yeah. Mayor Martin.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, and I apologize for distracting. That number just caught me off guard. For staff, page 109, table 1, parkland area. I just want to look at I just want to talk about that chart just for a brief moment, because I think there's a message in there and I'm not sure what the message was supposed to be and why this information is being provided. And so I'm just looking for a little more clarification. And I just want to say what I'm hearing, or what I think I'm hearing, and then I would like staff to correct me. When we talk about community park, so we talk about 1.2 and that Royal Bay is going to go to 2.7. So that would suggest to me that that's a good thing. And then when we talk about municipal parklands at being at 5.3 and Royal Beach is at 3.1, that would suggest to me that that's a bad thing. Is that what you are attempting to show me in this chart? Or I'm trying to understand, what is this information? How do I interpret this information, and what does this information actually tell me?
Through the chair. So what this information, and particularly the second part with the municipal parkland, as I understand it, in that when as part of the draft parks plan, the inventory identified all parks, which is the municipal parkland. So that's everything from a parkette to a linear pathway, you name it, it's all included in there. I think the point I'm trying to make is that in terms of the community parks, which are parks that are there for the broader public, Royal Beach will far exceed that in terms of the amount of parkland it's providing, which is exactly what we're trying to do, because as council said, this is a place where we want to draw people to. Now, in terms of, does it have little parkettes and little pathway park connections? That is something that at this level is probably not been fleshed out that much. So I would say, as an illustration or a response to the second part, I would expect as we develop out the parks plan in more detail, that 3.1 number will go up as we get into this in more detail.
Thank you. Through the chair. So just as a clarification though, the municipal parkland at 5.3, is that unusable land? Is like, so for example, is that a piece of land that the city got from a development, but really it has no access? It doesn't, it doesn't get used as a fundamental way that a park would normally be, and that it's just park land that the city now has, but it's not really meant as use by the general public. Am I correct in that? Is that what that means?
Through the chair, that is my understanding. It includes all city parkland, not necessarily lands that have been improved for public park use.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Day.
Thank you. There's God, so many notes. The parkland that is being proposed, I wanted to focus our attention because when the reports were done, especially by Thurber, we really focused on, the ocean and the retreating land from, the rising ocean levels due to climate change. But there's other impacts on the site that I hope we haven't lost sight of, which includes the sandy banks, which are obviously, my little helper here. You know how in Zoom you always have to have the family pets helping out. The issue is the erosion of those cliffs as well as the water coming in. So I am concerned that as you know, I've been visiting this area for well over 30 years now, and there has been significant erosion, including even in the last 10 or 15 years of those banks. And I think that it's very concerning to me because I haven't seen anything showing how those banks are going to be retained. There's still some pretty significant trees on some parts of the bank, but there are also very significant trees at the bottom of the bank that have already tumbled down the hill. And I have been there to visit them when they were still at the top of the hill. So my concern is with how do we ensure that any parks that we accept will actually be usable in the future and still remain.
Through the chair, Councillor Day, this is Brent Molnar speaking. When we originally started talking about the geotech considerations on the lands, and my apologies for not having the date directly in front of me, but it was earlier this year, we extensively spoke about the Green Shores approach to that shoreline, which was a non-hardened approach. The purposes of the Green Shores approach is that erosion continues to function as it is. The land will be eroded, it will deposit, it will contribute to the beach, it will continue to do its natural course. So regrettably, there is no surety that that bank won't slip. That's part of the Green Shores approach. However, council can always resolve at any point in time that erosion is past the point that they're comfortable with and choose a hardened approach, which has impact adjacent to the areas that have hardened and typically causes other impacts to the natural areas around us. If council wishes, we can always bring back that consideration, which we probably refreshed the geotech consideration earlier on in the year, and then ask for specificity in regards to the hard shore or Green Shores approach. There is time, however, to allow natural erosional processes to occur, and then to at a later time decide, yep, that's enough, we'll harden it from this point out. And in doing that, council may choose to affect what portions are hardened, what portions are left to erode, and that might be a balance. So to answer the question relevant today, we are working on that Green Shore approach, which was previously visited by council. However, we are prepared to receive instructions at any time that advise otherwise.
Thank you. So I remain concerned that the special sites that are identified, a couple of them are specifically in areas that have already been subject to erosion. And I'm just concerned that we put money into improving an area that is more or less still on the move. So I would suggest that at this point in time, because there is already a hardening that must take place in order to retain the settling ponds, in order to avoid an environmental major issue. that we need to understand how it is we're going to deal with it and what our trigger points are. And until we do understand that, how we're going to, keep that hardening of the cliff face in place, given that there's no real firm ground to put it on, that we should not be accepting any land between the settling ponds and the ocean until we have some sort of a plan that at least could predict the next 40 or 50 years. I understand we may not be able to predict what will happen in 100 years, but I think we should be able to figure out what will happen in the next 30 or 40 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Day. I have Niall Paltiel from Key Corp wishing to step in. Niall?
Hello, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just, between Councillor Baxter and Day, I just would like to go through some points raised there and just hopefully address them to the best of our ability. Firstly, when it comes to the park's terms of reference and the trail through to the headlands, our intent within the park's terms of reference, and I apologize if this wasn't clear, it was to connect a trail to ongoing trails, both to the width and standard of those existing trails beyond moving north from the headlands. And we should be mirroring up with the Ocean Boulevard Trail as well. That's actually part of why in our terms of reference, we proposed a granular trail because we actually match the same trail standard that the City of Colwood currently has proposed in their RFP for that Ocean Boulevard connection, as is also included in the City of Colwood current 2018 OCP designation for seaside development. Secondly, I think it's a good question about the 3 hectare piece for Area 8. I think it should be clear, though, the motion of council was to look at Area 8 with the suggestion of 3 hectares. We took that and we integrated a plan, which is now forming a sub-area plan, which provides a acre plus plaza area, the assurances of non-office and commercial development within the area, a broken up pattern of development and streetscape that will provide an outstanding world-class public realm, as well as the assurance that a number of buildings there will not be residential and will only be non-residential. This mix, and then the ability to cascade into Area 5 and the remaining portion of the landing, we think will address both the vision set out in the OCP and our urban design plan for this development, as you could see this evening. I don't think it was, I think the 3 hectare suggestion was adequate. And we also didn't meet your suggestion in some ways. In fact, we extended the shoreline frontage of Area 8 by 50 meters longer than was proposed in the motion. So there was some give and take there and some change, but ultimately I think that we met the spirit and intent of what was asked. And we were able to, through your suggestion, put enough box around that development area that I think the community and council will have a positive idea of what's being proposed. Thirdly, I'd just like to clarify, it was brought up by Mr. Carlson, and I'm just going to reiterate, the report states that the requirement to construct improvements within Area 3 will form part of the development agreement. So these improvements will be required in advance of subdivision or development works within Area 3. And that does include parkland as well. To Councillor Day's point, no, we're not thinking about the next 40 years. We're planning for the next 200 years. And that's why we're proposing a 2-meter sea level rise. And that's why there's actually a 90-meter setback between the high water mark and the first development on that site. So there's a lot of possibility and room for parks and open space between both the foreshore, which isn't our property, and then our property line, and then the development line set back even further. I would I would look at the city of Victoria as an example here. I'm sure at the day they gladly took parkland along Dallas Road, which still continues to erode and evolve over time, but it's regarded regionally and internationally as a spectacular waterfront land, and we do believe that Royal Beach will be as well. As far as shoreline erosion goes, NHC or Northwest has been monitoring the Royal Beach shoreline since the 1990s. This land along the Bluffs has actually been in the OCP, which was adopted in 2008, the Royal Bay Local Area Plan adopted in 2014, and the 2018 OCP. The land along the Bluffs has been envisioned throughout that time as dedicated parkland. And actually the only difference between 2018, 2008, and 2014 and what's being proposed today is that land has actually grown in order to accommodate the Green Shores approach that Mr. Molnar so adequately touched on, and the 2-meter sea level rise that we are proposing today. So NHC continues to monitor that, and I can confirm based on their reports and the report that you received on December 16th of 2019, that there has not been any significant shoreline erosion within the last 10 years. Not to say that there might not be some, because there will be over time, but in the last 10 years, the bank has really stabilized since the closure of the mine. Thank you, and I hope I've touched on some of the points that have been made by council this evening.
Thank you, Niall. I see Dennis has his hand up. Dennis Carlson, did you wish to say anything?
My apologies, Mr. Chair. Hand down.
Hand down. All right. I'm going to lower all hands then. I think it's just me that gets to talk still. Just on the a couple things on the parkland areas. I think they look pretty good. I just wasn't sure whether the calculations for parkland area from Royal Beach included provincial lands, or were this just the lands that are currently owned by Seacliff?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I stand to be corrected by Key Corp, but I believe that number excludes the lands that are beyond their property line and our Crown foreshore. Which would then, of course, if we were to consider those parks for at least a good portion of the next 200 years, would really bump those numbers up significantly. So, okay, thank you for that. I see Councillor Jansen has his hand up, Johnny come lately, but I just wanted to understand the trail from the landing to Ocean Boulevard by the duplexes. Are we considering that a cost to the developer, or is that something where the developer believes that the city's amenity fund should come into play? Through you, Mr. Chair, the details of that will have yet to be ironed out, but the developer has indicated that they are prepared to undertake the works necessary to make that extension, and how that would be accomplished will be more fully detailed when we do the parks plan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Jansen.
I think you lowered my hand, Mr. Chair. So all that's great. I've ticked it all off, and I love the connectivity to existing trails. I did have a question about Perimeter Park. And Perimeter Park obviously is separated. Passage Park connects to the top of the trail heading up the hill. But I just wonder if there's any connectivity to being considered to Perimeter Park. I think Dennis is probably best to answer.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe our intention is, and I think it's perhaps not adequately illustrated on here, but short answer is yes, it will all connect.
Okay, thanks. Everything else has been ticked off.
Okay.
And I'm happy to make the recommendation there. We'll kill two birds with one stone.
So I think the recommendation you're making is that Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that the Royal Beach Parks Terms of Reference dated October 1st, 2020, as included in the staff report dated October 6, 2020, be included in the Royal Beach Development Agreement, and that the subsequent parks plan be substantially in accordance with the Royal Beach Parks Terms of Reference and as considered by Council in this report, without the third part that's been withdrawn. That what you said, Dean? Thought so. Don't need a seconder. Any discussion of that motion? Seeing none, any in opposition to that motion? Oops, I have Councillor Day in opposition. That motion passes. Okay, next we're going to move on to item 5.4, report from Aaron Knutson, our intermediate engineering technologist on Royal Beach Road Design Standards. Aaron, are you ready to go?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Perfect. I will share my screen here. Everyone's seeing my screen right now?
I believe so, yes.
Perfect. All right, thank you. Yeah, so tonight I'm presenting the Royal Beach Road Design Standards. The road design standards are intended to be within the Royal Beach lands. Myself and the Director of Engineering and Development Services, Brent Molnar, will be available for questions after the presentation. I'd like to start out with just a brief background, which I guess kind of ties in with the previous presentations from the developer and a little bit from Dennis and Helen. As you can see, the location of the property we are discussing is located along the waterfront and along Machosen Road, which will tie into the Latoria Boulevard intersection, as well as Ryder Hedgedall extension when that is built, and potentially the Commons Road extension through Royal Bay. The lands are separated into a few different areas, development areas, which I believe has gone over in quite good detail from Seacliff. The Bluffs, which is mostly residential single family. The landing area, which would be your commercial and a little bit higher density development. And then the Headlands, which again is mostly single family dwellings. The purpose for bringing this report to committee and council is to establish updated, more current road standards that incorporate connected pedestrian connectivity and cycling routes, bike lanes and multi-use pathways, and which encourage different mode of transportation, and as well trying to reduce vehicle speeds through road design. We've broken the report into various sections, basically based on road design. So your local roads, your collectors, your commercial collectors. We're going to discuss the multi-use pathways a little bit more. And as well, we're going to be discussing a proposed speed limit reduction for the internal local roads. Moving on. Here we have the recommendations, which are taken from the report, which were presented in the report that you should all have at your hands. I'm not going to go into great detail on these right now, but if anybody has some questions about the recommendations that are shown here, we can always go back to this or discuss it later. So now I'll move on to a little bit more of the details here, starting with the neighborhood local roads. You can see on the map here, the local roads are shown in orange, which would be mostly where the single family dwellings would be would exist. The green is all the minor collector roads. So a little bit more traffic flow on those roads, fronting some of the higher density and connecting up to the central spine arterial roads. The purple is the minor collector for the upper and lower Latoria extension, as well as the lower sort of landing street, which is in the waterfront area. And then the Maltese pathways are again shown in these dotted light green lines and the darker green dotted lines. So the multi-use are the sort of lighter green along these areas here. And then these would be your sort of neighborhood connectors, pathways. All right, moving on. We have table 1 here, which is also taken straight from the report. Basically just compares the works that are required by our current bylaw versus the works that are proposed by the developer. I'm not going to go into great detail on this slide here, as I'd like to save my time for discussing the cross sections in greater detail. But we can definitely come back to this slide if anyone has some questions later on. Here we go into the local road sections taken from the bylaw, as well as the proposed section. Again, I'm not going to go into great detail on this slide here, as we really want to move on to the next slide to discuss, oops, sorry, went a little too fast there. We really want to discuss the proposed cross-section compared to our most current sort of standard, which is taken from the Transportation Master Plan. So in just comparing the two, the right-of-way width is a little bit different. 20 meters is typical, and here we're asking for 18 meters. The 2 travel lanes are exactly the same, 3.25 meters in both. We got roadside parking, and in the TMP cross-section, you can see a 2.5 meter buffer. This was intended to be basically alternating parking scallops with boulevard landscaped areas. So that's what's shown down here is we got the 2.5 parking, and then you can sort of see a little bump out peeking out behind the car here. So that's the alternating parking bays that we're going for. And then we have the separated sidewalks. A little bit difference here is 2 meters are shown in the Transportation Master Plan, whereas we're proposing the 1.5 meters on both sides in the proposed section. You'll also notice there's no bike lanes. It's following the intent of the Transportation Master Plan for local roads and neighborhoods is it's shared surfaces, kind of try and keep the speeds down, which ties into the speed limit reduction that we're going to be talking about just a little bit later. Okay, moving on. We're on to the neighborhood minor collectors. Again, they are shown in green on here, and then those were the orange roads again, that were the local roads. So again, we'll move on here and show table 2, which is comparing the works required by the bylaw to the proposed works for the minor collector roads. Again, I'm going to move past this slide pretty quickly here, just so we can concentrate on the cross sections. Here is the cross sections for the collector road from the bylaw compared to the proposed minor collector cross section. Again, I'm going to move past this to get to our most current design or standard, sorry, taken from the Transportation Master Plan. Really the differences here right off the bat are the locations of the bike lanes. Transportation Master Plan calls for buffered bike lanes roadside, whereas in this case, we're proposing the bike lanes be separated by the boulevard just for added protection, as well as to avoid conflict with the parking bays. We're going to try and maximize parking as much as we can in the commercial areas as well as residential areas. So we really want to try and avoid, having the bike lanes sort of end or be in conflict with parking. So we thought the best way to resolve that was to have them adjacent to the sidewalks and away from traffic. Otherwise, the sections are fairly similar. Sidewalks on both sides, a slight reduction in the sidewalk on the proposed at 1.8 versus 2 meters on the TMP. Also, we are anticipating center turn lane pockets just to keep the vehicle flow without interruption. So we're going to add some medians with a little bit of plantings, some trees potentially. And that pretty much wraps up that. Next, we move on to the Upper Latoria Neighborhood Minor Collector. Now that is this portion here, if everyone can see my mouse, basically from this breakpoint right here up to Machosen Road. And a little bit different standard is being applied here because we're looking at flow of traffic, connection to the collectors, as well as feeding into the arterials, Machosen Road and Latoria Boulevard. So again, we move on to the table here, which compares the works bylaw versus the proposed works. And moving on, here's the section from the bylaw compared to the section that they're proposing. We're going to flip past that and move right to the TMP again. And here you can see the big differences again are the medians, introduction of medians, and the turn lane. We still have the parking bays on both sides, which would have been captured up in this green space up here, this 2.2 meter green space in the TMP cross section. And again, we're separating the bike lanes, much like the other minor collectors throughout the neighborhood, the development. The other key element to look at here is the introduction of these private sidewalks. Now, those are going to be captured by way of either a stat right-of-way or through a building setback to enable storefront furniture, signs, tables, what have you, maybe pedestrians sort of socializing, still allowing a pedestrian corridor to pass through. So we'll basically have a 4 meter wide pedestrian way through there. I guess to get all of that, the parking bays, the center turn lane, the separated bike lanes, we've had to bump up the right of way to 23 meters from the typical 20 meters. And moving on to the commercial collector or slash lower Latoria extension. This is intended, this cross section is intended to basically work well with slower moving traffic, but still handle the density and demand, be pedestrian friendly, and provide access to the waterfront and connect up to the urban park areas and the Maltese pathway. So table 4 here again compares the bylaw works to the proposed works. Here I'm just going straight to the TMP to compare the proposed section. Now here we have quite a different cross section to consider. Main reasons are for what I just stated is we want to try and maximize parking abilities. We want a pedestrian friendly zone, slower moving traffic, that sort of stuff. So as you can see from the proposed section, we actually are introducing angled parking The angled parking will mostly be concentrated in front of the commercial areas and public spaces. And then where road grades are a little bit trickier, we'll probably move back into a parallel parking design. Again, we have the 2-meter sidewalk with a 2-meter private sidewalk. So again, we get that 4-meter sort of pedestrian corridor with a little bit of room for some signage and tables and that sort of stuff. We aren't proposing bike lanes through this section, as we was alluded to in the previous presentations, largely because we're looking again to reduce these speeds through this zone, a little bit more user, pedestrian friendly. We're going to have the multi-use pathway that I'll touch on a little later, that's going to run along the waterfront, which we think will have bicycles on that on that multi-use pathway. And moving on from there, we lead right into the multi-use pathways. So I think we've talked quite a bit about that in the previous presentations, but I'll go over it briefly again. We have the what we're calling the connector multi-use, which is going to connect up from the chosen road and connect up with the separated bike lanes on Latoria Boulevard and run through the linear drainage channel park, which would be more of a natural sort of feel to it. So it quite possibly could be a granular surface, possibly 3 meters wide, and sort of providing that family sort of feel, going out with your kids and your bikes, that sort of thing. So not necessarily a commuter way, but more of a, yeah. And then we move on to the waterfront multi-use pathway. That is intended to connect up to the pathways on either side of the development, as we talked about on Ocean Boulevard. Hopefully we can get that connection made through the parklands and either in front or behind those houses. And then we're hoping to get it to come through all the way somewhere in this area here in the Bluffs. There's probably going to be a transition from that waterfront look and feel to more of a neighborhood pathway trail. And that's largely based on, the parklands that we want to preserve, as well as grades. Some grade challenges may exist in that area. We just don't know that for sure yet. That information hasn't been flushed out. So yeah, moving on a little bit more on the waterfront multi-use pathway. This pathway is going to provide access to the beach from, obviously for the residents of Royal Beach, as well as Royal Bay, and outside of Colwood even. So, we're anticipating obviously pedestrians, bicycles, potentially rollerblading, maybe even scooters. We could even see people in smaller groups socializing. So this sort of leads staff to envision a wider surface than a typical sort of multi-use pathway. We're leading towards a 4-meter width and for it to be hard surface. And like I explained, the reason for that is to accommodate all those other uses that a gravel surface just won't accommodate. Last we heard from the development or from the developer is they are proposing a narrower 3-meter surface and potentially a more natural look and feel, which would be a granular surface. Now moving on to the neighborhood local road speed limit change. Similar to what we went through with Royal Bay South, we're looking at reducing the local road speed limits from 50 kilometers an hour, which are specified in our speed limit bylaw 1612, to 40 kilometers per hour for the through local roads as well as the cul-de-sacs. And again, that is largely based on just allowing bicycles to share the road with vehicles at sort of similar speeds, a little bit more safety, that sort of stuff. So in conclusion, the proposed road designs largely meet the intent of Colwood's Transportation Master Plan, as well as the official community plan. They provide safer separated sidewalks, multi-use pathways, improved pedestrian and cycling connectivity, provide mode choices for transportation, as well as they provide transit-friendly road network. The new standards would be specific to Royal Beach lands and would be added to the current bylaw as an appendix or a schedule. The applicant's proposal follows the intent of bylaw 285 as well as the TMP and OCP. Therefore, staff is recommending committee and council's consideration for these proposed road design standards. In closing, I just have here the options and alternatives that were presented in the report. And I will leave this screen up for discussion or any questions. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. I have 3 hands up at present. Councillor Jansen, you want to lead us off?
I wasn't ready for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That largely answered many of my questions, and I appreciate the detail. I am in favor of the wider multi-use path, as mentioned specifically here, especially if we're going to talk about rollerblading and just for ease of accessibility for all ages and abilities. I think it'll be a wonderful addition to the property. And how far that extends and whether it goes property line to property line, I mean, we can discuss that, or whether it's just certain high traffic sections. I'm open to some discussion on that. And I think largely my questions have been answered. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jansen. Mayor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually very, very excited that this is an exciting time for us, an exciting time for us as a city as we start to see the potential of this property and how this is going to function for our residents. And I'm really quite looking forward to moving this forward. A couple, and also sort of supporting what Councillor Jansen said, I'm very much supportive of the 4-meter wide multi-use pathway. And I'm also actually very supportive of it being hard surfaced. And so I will be supporting both of those this evening. 2 questions. One, just about entering into Royal Beach. If you are using bikes or anything else, will there be a logical, safe way to move quickly if, for example, we had a ferry and people will want to go as directly as possible? Do we believe that the system that we're building out right now will support something along that lines if the ferry was to ever happen? That's my first question to staff.
Through the chair, Councillor Mayor Martin, this is something that we've worked really hard with the developer, and I agree the transition from a multi-use to a road edge surface trail is tricky at intersection nodes. What we've worked to bring about is the duality, quite frankly. People who are commuting can use the road surface and the multi-use trail that's combined in that protected environment with the road surface, and those wishing a more leisurely environmental aspect or stroll, maybe less likely the commuter can use the pathway that's adjacent to the waterway that comes down. So there's actually 2 options, and we believe that the road option provides that cleanest connectivity. But as Aaron Knutson pointed out, as we round the corner and go down to that waterfront, we're looking for a lower speed environment, and that intersection point of transfer between the two different ways to deal with the cyclist in terms of a Wunner or more shared design to the protected pathway is exactly part of that decision tree where it translates over to a potential ferry.
Thank you. And along the same lines, so still talking about that, if you were to be leaving the Royal Beach properties by bicycle, would there be an option in regards to the terrain? Would there be an option for people who are riding their bike to be able to zigzag so that they're not having to climb a steep hill? Is the pathways designed in such a way? I couldn't tell from a topography standpoint if we're actually accomplishing that.
So again, through the chair, Brent speaking here. Some of the details that we do know the grades that the design is considering for that main arterial road, that Silatory extension. There hasn't been a lot of zigzagging proposed. It is more meandering trail up the drainage route. I think the most circuitous, the most zigzaggy route would ultimately be traveling further south to the edge, but we do think that there'll be a grade component there. You are very correct though. And I'm sorry for the pause there, but you're correct. We haven't physically designed in, let's say, a 5% circuit, zigzaggy route up, but we can work on some of those details on the environmental trail, which is beside the drainage course, to see if there's opportunity for that. That would be forthcoming in future design elements or as we further flesh it out.
Excellent, thank you. And then my final question, Chair, and this is for my own information. I don't have a lot of personal experience with private sidewalks and how private sidewalks interact with the city. I understand, that would allow them to put a canopy or something off their property building, and it would still be within that. I guess I'm thinking more just from a conceptual standpoint. Are there cities that you can point to that also utilize the private sidewalk modality that you guys are talking about?
Through the chair, I'm just going to leave my hand up for that one, if it's all right, to answer Mayor Martin's question. Yes, this is done all over the place. The City of Victoria uses it. An excellent example of that would be Yates Street, where you've got the building interaction with the pedestrian environment. The key is that, quite frankly, the key is that the private sidewalk doesn't exist for the user. It's a factor of land, and it would be a right of use that would enable the public to have a statutory right of way over. But as well as it grants the business owners the permissive right to use the land in a non-obtrusive way to animate the street. We view this area to be the interactive zone between tables and chairs and umbrellas, and bits of spillover for the business to help bring that animation in while not needing to consider separate and unique licenses of occupation for that. So this is the zone where you'll get those tables, where you get those chairs, where you'll get those outdoor seatings. Perhaps you're right, bank canopy covering provided for that and allows greater flexibility in the use of the land while still providing that seamless environment. I know that it's used in our adjacent municipality. I know that it's used in downtown Victoria. I could do some research to find out if it's done in Saanich. I'm not overtly aware.
Thank you. And so, sorry, Chair, and I will bring this to a close. And I guess the reason I'm asking that question about how other municipalities have interacted with private sidewalks is more, I guess, more from a standpoint of enforcement, from a city standpoint on maintenance and repairs and quality or standard of quality of that sidewalk. Continuing on, I don't know, is that usually mandated through a bylaw? How would we as a city continue to have a standard for these private sidewalks moving forward once the development is built out?
Through the chair, to Mayor Martin, this is Brent Molnar speaking again. I'll just say that because I'm clicking onto Dennis's line here. As I speak, it's supposed to be seamless. It is not covered in a bylaw. It is covered in the terms of the statutory right-of-way agreement. Those terms are typically written around the exact matters of what you spoke about: ownership, maintenance, and repair. The they could certainly be crafted to say that the developer or owner shall meet the same timelines for repair that the city would for any obstruction or obstacle in the pedestrian environment. And as I say, it's intended to be, again, seamless. It's almost an invisible line to the pedestrian user. But those are typically not in a bylaw, but typically in that legal agreement that covers that use of land.
And I apologize, Chair. So when is no longer the developer and it is the next owner? So for example, the next owner of the building, that just automatically carries over to that owner.
So I think these are great points that you're drilling in on, and it's the legal aspects that council typically doesn't get to see. Yes, it does run with the lands, and so it befalls the owner, and it is the owner's obligation to make themselves aware at the time of real estate transaction of whatever agreements are in place, and that's the purpose of the legal conveyor at the time of land purchase and transfer.
Great, thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. So just for my clarity, I see Dennis Carlson has his hand up, but is that just you, Brent, or Dennis, did you have things to add?
No, that's just me, Councillor Parkinson. Thank you for asking. I'll lower it now.
All right. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I first of all, I'll enforce Mayor Martin's or Chair Mayor Martin's enthusiasm about the project and where we're at to date, and thank staff for the excellent report. Many of my questions have been answered. I just want to touch on a couple of things. I think of Cole Harbor and English Bay, and their multi-use paths aren't gravel. They're hard surface, and they really animate the area. And so I think bigger is better, and a hard surface is important. I also am in favor, simply because of the location, that the connector multi-use pathway should be a hard surface as well. And I say that because for a couple of reasons. The multi-purpose pathway through Meadow Park along a drainage channel is a hard surface. So in terms of continuity, I think that's important, and it's a good standard. But secondly, if I'm a parent with young kids, that's the route I'm going to take to access the commons, as an example, going back and forth. And when we have a hard surface in inclement weather, such as snow and ice, it's easier for the city to be able to maintain that route to the commercial node in Royal Bay. And it's a safer node, or a safer route as far as I'm concerned, especially for those with kids. And given it's not in the if it's not in the part of the rural part of Royal Beach, then it should be hard surfaced and treated as more of a neat or professional look. Also, I will say that the transition from road into the park should be treated with care and with interest. Again, I will point to Royal Bay that has done a really good job in terms of creating plazas with different types of concrete treatments. And I think we want to continue that, because that enhances, in my opinion, the development. And there's lots of possibilities here. And so I perhaps I'm being picky, but those are my observations based on experiences. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Logan. I believe Key Corp is trying to wave a hand and can't find it. Is that correct? Did Key Corp want to jump in here and say something?
That is correct. I do not have a hand. It's Tanisha here. I wanted to speak to the multi-use pathways and talking about the material. So I'm going to start with the waterfront multi-use pathway because that was the longer conversation a little bit earlier. The 4-meter width is something that we find is appropriate and not something we take issue with. However, paving that or making that into a hard surface, there are a few things that we'd like to bring up. The first is that we will envision and see Royal Beach looking similar to West Vancouver's Kitts Beach, which has that more naturalized environmental feel. As well, those pathways are going to be lower maintenance and upkeep cost over time for the municipality and align with your waterfront connectivity RFP that's out. Also, while we were designing the multi-use pathways, at first they were quite a bit larger and had this different sort of intent. But as our road right-of-ways got larger and we had dedicated bike lanes and these extra wide sidewalks, especially on Latoria, we moved away from that because now it's a secondary transportation option for more meandering and walking than it is to be a like commuter or connector trail. We find that the crusher material is more environmentally friendly and natural, and that naturalized softscape feel is what we'd like to have as a theme throughout all of Royal Beach, connecting, north, south, and east, west. And finally, paved surfaces like that can be bad for dogs when they're walking, and this is a huge dog walking area, so we don't want to see our puppy friends be impacted. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Georgia has her hand up as well. Georgia, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, hi. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. I just wanted to add to Tanisha's comments as well, just in regards to consideration for a soft landscaping approach, that we did actually pose this question to the public at one of our open houses we hosted back in, I believe it was back in October 2019. And it was a well-attended open house. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I would just like to add that there was a huge amount of support that we received from the public at that open house in support for a soft landscaping design approach. That attendees and respondents were quite supportive of how the landscape plan had been designed to complement the natural beauty of the property in that regard. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter next.
Yeah, I want to chime in on the sidewalks and pathways to say that I think that all of the pathways, multi-use pathways that are around those ponds and in front of the lower development should be disabled friendly, and I'm assuming staff will be taking that into account, and I would definitely go for concrete if that is more disabled friendly, wheelchair friendly, I should say. But if the gravel can be made wheelchair friendly, then I don't have any objection to that. And once one starts to go up into the bluffs, I would imagine it might have to change simply because of grades. But normally, what is the target grade for maximum grade for roads, and what's the target maximum grade for sidewalks or pathways?
In this development in specific, Mr. Baxter?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Aaron, do you have that?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I mean, our standard road grades in our bylaw are currently 12%. And it's possible that some of this Latoria extension could be in that range. Now, the multi-use coming down the linear drainage channel may also be in that range. We don't have the specifics at this point to point to that, but you're correct. We would change from a granular surface to potentially an asphalt surface where the grades would exceed 12%. To prevent sort of raveling and slipping, safety for pedestrians.
I think you'll find that wheelchair friendly is 8 or 8.3%, and having that on the main road would seem to be a really unfortunate thing, unless we could provide a different but not much longer route for wheelchairs that would be wheelchair friendly, and I'm not sure how you'd do that. So I think that needs a careful look and a report back if you have to do anything other than 8.3%.
We're stuck on the west side.
6% for wheelchair.
Through the chair to Councillor Baxter's question, Brent Molnar speaking. Like completely agree with you. And one of the interesting things is the image that Aaron is still sharing here. Dennis and I are sitting in the same room, and so we do have the opportunity to chat sometimes that we're muted. There was a couple of key comments in your last statement there, which was about not increasing the length. There is a more accessible route. It's actually the, I'm going to try and describe it using the image that's in front of you while Aaron is sharing the screen, because my mouse isn't going to drive it, I think, from your point of view. But if you look at the sign where, or the notice where it says Waterfront multi-use path, and the purple line travels to the north along that frontage, sorry, that way, that's exactly right. And then if you follow the bus route out, that would be a lesser grade route. Now, I can't speak to it being less than 8% throughout, but it would be a loop route back to the Central Spine Road. That's certainly not shorter, but would provide options. We can also look at some of those cut-through routes that are shown as those road grades, and as we work greater to figure out the grades of the bisecting routes, we can certainly come back with more information in regards to that maximum grade consideration.
At what point do you think you will have that information?
Well, we actually asked from the developer team now to start looking at some of the grades. They just haven't factored into the presentation of the standards that we're coming at, because they were given the specificity of ensuring that they all met municipal code. So it's the next level of detail, and I would ask one of the developers to offer up the timeline for that.
Who wants to jump in on that one?
Hi there, Mr. Chair. It's Niall with Key Corp Planning. So a couple points to touch on there. One, I actually, not only do I think I echo Councillor Baxter's question, but I think it should be supported or understood that gravel and crusher standards, when applied appropriately, do have not only can they meet accessibility standards, but they can in fact enhance accessibility, especially when you're speaking about sites like ours, which have those higher grades, because they do create a bit of friction or resistance, whereas a black paver can be a bit more of a runway. So the thing to keep in mind is we're fixed at Machosen Road and we're fixed at the waterfront, and then we have to figure out how to basically appropriately move people down the hill. The current Latoria Boulevard, based on Point's initial modeling, is a 9% grade, and then the remainder of the property will likely be less than that. That being said, all of that work we can get you a preliminary grades likely before public hearing, but it really isn't. It really isn't something that we had anticipated at this early stage, because the road layout, like was done for the approval at Latoria South, at this point is preliminary until we're past public hearing and working on a development agreement. That being said, the stormwater pond and the trail which runs down the stormwater pond, or the Creekside Trail as was identified in the parks terms of reference in the parks plan, will provide that wider, accessible, granular trail for people to move down to the water, and the grade there is intended to be below that 9% as well.
Okay, that sounds like there's a feasible solution there. Thank you.
You done, Michael?
Yep.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm going to be the only person that likes the soft surface. I mean, you get to see both of it up in Royal Bay, right? The path going up to the school. There by the school there is gravel, and on top it's hard surface, and by the drainage creek it's all hard surface, but I must admit I do like the gravel type. It's a lot more natural. I do agree that the 4 meters would be a great thing. I only have one question here, but I can live with whatever the majority wants here. I do have one question, and it's kind of a goofy question, and I know it's because of our road standards. You know, we have on the on-street parking right now. We have where you have parallel parking. We have these scallops that are out in the street. So I just, is that just for aesthetics, or is there a safety requirement to do that? Don't we lose a lot of parking because we do that? It's just a question I have. I'm not here to change the standard, but I'm just asking why we do that. Is it just aesthetics? If maybe staff, through the chair, if staff could answer that.
No problem, Councillor Kobayashi. Through the chair, the bulb out perspective was first implemented in the areas called Royal Bay Northlands, where at the time of zoning consideration, the standard for street trees and bump outs and the beautification was brought right forward. We have taken that consideration as intersection nodes or areas to be able to improve, I suppose, the greening of the street, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
They do provide a minor safety advantage at intersections where you're bringing the pedestrian closer out to the travel surface, so they have a higher presentability to the vehicular movement and they aren't likely to be hidden behind cars. But you're also correct when you say that they lose street parking. They do. The distance to create one of those bump outs and back in for a parking stall is about 70% of a parking stall. Mm-hmm. So we're really looking from, I'm going to say, a learned example from the Royal Bay Northlands as to how we can apply it in better proximity to the roadways and also elongate some of those parking scallops, recognizing that we've got trees in other boulevard areas. We can also apply trees to the land areas, but because some of the commercial aspects are going to be right up and tight to the sidewalk, and even in this image that is on your screen now, there's a very hard surface environment against the building face. And so we needed to find ways to improve the aesthetics and make sure that the streets did have the green factors, which are held so near and dear in the significant portions of our bylaw. So we're looking at maximizing the parallel parking intent while still creating the bulbs and parkings scallops, so we can bring the pedestrian out at the intersection nodes. So we believe that we're keeping it safe. We also believe that we're trying to maximize the parking while keeping the street beautification intent at play as well. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you very much.
I see Nadine King has raised her hand. She's from Watt Consulting and probably the expert on this subject. So Nadine, what can you add?
Well, I was just going to add, there is a minor safety improvement to it, particularly as Brent said, at intersections or where we're entering and exiting an intersection. It just prevents people from driving straight into the parking or straight out of it. I definitely think, as Brent said, though, it would be more at key intersections and not necessarily at every single driveway along the corridor, so that we could continue to maximize it, because a driveway is a very different experience than at those key intersections. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Are you done, Councillor Kobayashi? I'm going to take that as a yes. Councillor Day?
Yes.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions left for me. Really great discussion on the accessibility. There is really great information still posted on the West Shore Parks and Rec website from our work on the user-friendly trail guide, which is where I learned my information. I just want to suggest that sometimes it's really challenging to take these beautiful places where we live that have a great deal of height, say from Machosen Road all the way down to the waterfront, and to try to create accessible options. But I think there are ways to accomplish it. And one of the ways is through dedicated accessible parking spots, because sometimes it's better to provide a transit stop or an accessible parking bay that starts the wheelchair out at a more accessible level to the rest of the site. So that is something to consider when you run up against the elevation changes that make it very difficult. But the advice from the Disabilities Committee has been the wider the better and the smoother the better. So it is possible to achieve a workable surface with crushed fines, which would be a permeable surface, but they're not nearly as resistant to erosion from rainwater, etc. And they do require much more maintenance, both in the winter time when there's bad weather and after the bad weather has passed. Maintaining a gravel type path versus a paved path, for example, or a hard surface path. It is very hard to keep snow and ice from building up on the more natural surfaces. So I think there's probably a happy medium somewhere in there in the middle of it all. But there is also the consideration for cross slopes are really important for people who use mobility aids, whether it's a walker or a cane or a wheelchair. And visually impaired people also benefit from those places that highlight the changing surfaces. So those are a few keys that I could give you off the top of my head. I really like the cycle lanes that have been proposed that are separate from the roadways, from the cars. Putting the bikes beside the sidewalks, I think, makes a lot of sense. It will keep it safe, whether you're 8 years old or 80 years old. But I'm wondering if staff have had a look at how they would maintain those, as I just know that all of our cycle lanes have been quite a challenge to keep the debris from gathering there. And has that been considered in the recommendation?
Through the chair, this is Brent Molnar speaking. To address Councillor Day's question, the city has a bylaw in place that requires that businesses, homeowners, and property owners maintain the boulevard and sidewalk fronting their dwelling units. I agree that that is a challenging statement unto itself. However, the bylaw does exist, and I would suggest that education, continual communication, posting through our website would help inform those peoples of their responsibility, as well as wherever we propose this multi-use path being adjacent to the sidewalk. It actually is where there is business continuity, in which case they are equally as vested as ensuring that the user has accessibility to their doorfront, as the city is, frankly. So I think that we need a combined approach to reinforce the strategic policies that are in place right now. Don't suggest that I have all the answers, but that we work actively towards that. And last year we started with the publication on our website talking about winter and ice and snow removal duties, asking for help. And I think that that's part of our proposal, but I'm certainly willing to receive any advice from council or further input as necessary. Thank you.
Okay. I just thought we might have some ideas on particular equipment for maintenance of them, because I know we do have street sweepers that we contract out to do our roadways, who are some are better than others, I guess, is the answer at doing those cycle lanes. So my next question and my last question really is on the multi-use pathway, because we know that the foreshore area where the pathway would be located is actually leased from the federal government. So is there any issue with putting a hard surface on land that we don't actually own? It's not owned by the city and it's not owned by the developer.
So thanks very much for raising that. So there is a discrepancy between the images shown by the developer and the one that you see in front of you here. The image that you see here identifies the multi-use pathway sitting right against that property line, with Flynn Row lands being how do I describe it, in the white space below the image. So it is shown to be on the developer's land, would be subject to erosion in time, but is shown to be on the portion of land that's controlled by the developer, and that is where the images don't meet up. So I'd like to actually, with that, state that I think that we need to work on it further, but also offer the developer's comment to help augment that consideration.
Mr. Chair, it's Niall. May I?
Please go ahead now.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the discussion and ideas that are being raised by members of council this evening. I take it that I think that this is an item, as is outlined in the staff report, that ultimately can be resolved as a discussion with council as forming part of the development agreement. It's not, I don't think, necessarily pertinent to the bylaw, specifically speaking to these road standards and the connections, trail and pathway standards. And so I guess what I'm getting at here is I believe on behalf of the applicant, it would be our preference that council move the recommendation of further discussion specifically on the pathway design, width, and finishing or treatment, and we will present both a transportation accessibility and landscape rationale at that time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Day, did you have more?
I just wanted to comment. Just my final comment is that it is quite important in order to, not single out one disability, but to work towards the most accessible that we can make it. So I think that that can be accomplished through, there's many ways to do it, but I think the most important thing is that when people who need some type of assistance to move around come to this beautiful new area, that they are able to find themselves able to find a place to park or a way to get there and a way to move around the site that works for them, as long as they're not stuck. A lot of times, like the big catchphrase from our user-friendly trail guide was to go beyond the parking lot, because in the early days of accessibility, the best you could hope for was an accessible parking spot, but the likelihood was that once you got out of your vehicle, there was probably nowhere that you could take your mobility device to. So as long as we can get beyond the parking spot, I will be pleased to see that happening. Just as that there shouldn't be any place that I'm not allowed to go in the city, I don't think there should be any place that people with mobility issues aren't allowed to go either. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Niall
again.
Just through you, one last comment on that. Just that, as is referenced in our parks terms of reference and part of your agenda this evening, wherever feasible from grade, our pathway commitment is to the Wanafuka Park standards, which I believe are beyond the parking lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Niall. I see, Georgia, you have your hand up still. I'm assuming that's just hasn't been dropped, or would you like to chime in here?
Yeah, sorry, that's an error on my part.
Okay, that's all right. It's been there for a while. Councillor Baxter's got his hand up again, but I'm going to stick my 2 cents worth in here. And I think, Aaron, I see in the developer's presentation, there was a reference to using the same streetlights as in Royal Bay, which is, I think, what preferable, what we'd like. I just wonder if that requires an amendment to the existing bylaw or not. I also noticed there's no talk of geometric standards, so we're assuming that the vertical curves and K values and the like are all satisfactory in today's, in the existing subdivision bylaw. And we have had a discussion that maybe some preliminary road grades will come forward in the next short while to just make sure that what the roads are being contemplated at makes sense. So as long as those are all okay, then I'm happy. I have a couple of questions I'd like to present to Nadine, if I may. And that's about the just the volume of internal traffic and getting in and out of the site, and whether there's any issues likely with that. And it kind of, I think, to some extent spills over with another concern of mine about the pedestrian crossing at Latoria and Machosen. I just kind of think with, 2,800 units, that could create a lot of traffic at certain times. Pedestrians may benefit from a grade separated crossing there. Maybe they don't. I don't know if you've run those numbers or if you can comment on those.
Yes, I can comment on them. So we have done
might be able to.
we have done a preliminary review of the internal traffic on the site at full build out. I focused on the PM because when I compared the AM to PM, the numbers are actually fairly similar and a little bit lower. Usually in the morning, we tend to get higher, left turns, say, coming from Headlands and Bluffs, as people try and go to work. But in this case, because there's quite a high amount of office and retail use with people coming to the office or, workers coming to open up their stores, we sort of almost see a balance, and that the PM is a little bit higher. So that's sort of the focus. Internally, every intersection functions well in the long term with appropriate stop control, with the exception of one location, which is on the map that's on the screen right now, where it says Upper Latoria Neighborhood Collector, kind of that arrow. I'm calling that Landing Road A, just because it's that one there. So that one at about 50% of the retail office space. So that's about 425,000 square feet, would probably need to be upgraded at that time to a full signal. But up until that point, there is capacity for traffic to get in and out with appropriate turn lanes. If the signal wasn't put in for some reason at that 50% mark, you'd probably start to see more people running through to the Bluffs as they wanted to get up to Machosen and then could make a right out. So there is a benefit to signalizing that or being prepared for that around the 50% mark. We do have quite a number of left turners, which is, so if I'm going to go back to the Machosen-Latoria intersection, left turns are really the biggest, left and right turns are the biggest conflicts for the pedestrians. We can mitigate some of that through protecting left turns and getting them sort of out of the way and having their own separate phase from the through and right turn movements. But in the full build out, I would say the challenge with putting in any sort of pedestrian overpass or underpass is pedestrians really don't like them. And so unless you're sort of dealing with like a Highway 1 Mackenzie type situation where you got to get across 5,000 or 6,000 cars a day or an hour, they'll take their chances going across at a signal. And I think, we are providing them with multiple opportunities, whether that's at Ryder Hedgedale, Latoria Boulevard, or further south on Machosen, with potential options to cross where the volume gets lower and lower as we go towards Machosen. So that's kind of what I have. If there's more questions, I'm here.
Yeah, okay. No, that's fine. If you think it's going to work, then I certainly defer to your expertise here, not mine. So tell us just one more thing. There's been a lot of discussion on pathways and surfacing and stuff like that. Just for clarity, I'll throw my oar in the water. I guess I had pictured the 4-meter hard surfaced walkway from the landing right through to Ocean Boulevard. I'm not as keen on the, on the other parts of the other areas. I know some councillors looked at more hard surfacing and others are less. So there's a discussion to be had there. So I think it's fair that I put my point of view out there. I guess I'm thinking I would expect over time that this is going to be a very popular commuter cycling route. And I think to hard surface it and get people down to Ocean Boulevard is going to be valuable. And I recognize it does put quite an onus on council to extend that opportunity across Ocean Boulevard, which is a big ticket item and something that we're going to have to wrestle with, or future councils have to wrestle with sometime. But that's where I'm thinking on that. So it sounds like there's maybe some more discussion to be had on the multi-use pathways. Councillor Day, I see your hand is still up. Did I cut you off, or is that just a forget to lower?
I think, yeah, I didn't put it down. I thought you did, but that's okay.
All right. Okay. It's consider it down. All right. I think we're ready for a motion. And I see Mayor Martin coming first. Mayor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I will move the staff recommendation. I'm happy to read it out if you'd like, but it's there. Well, actually, I guess I will read it out so that we received the report, Royal Beach design standards, and the committee of the whole consider recommending to council that the road standards proposed in the October 19th staff report titled Royal Beach design standards be accepted, and that the Colwood subdivision and land development of land bylaw number 1995, bylaw number 285 be amended to add specific road standards as the appendix or schedule for Royal Beach lands, and that council speed regulation bylaw number 1612 be amended to reduce the posted speed limits for local roads within Royal Beach lands from 50 kilometers to 40, and further that the waterfront multi-use pathway be a 4 meter in width and shall be constructed with a hard surface. The final design details shall be finalized with the development agreement.
Thank you. I'll take that. I'm going to lower all hands and ask if there's any discussion on that motion. Seeing none, all those in opposition, please raise your hands. Seeing none, I'll declare that motion passed. Next, we'll move on to 5.5, Royal Beach bylaw amendments, presentation by Dennis Carlson. Dennis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this presentation is mostly in response to the direction from Council August 31st, particularly regarding some concerns around areas 1 and 2, and more specifically around areas 8. So at that time, Council directed staff to provide a report to Council regarding options to limit the area of 6,600 square meters of non-residential floor areas in areas 1 and 2. As noted by the Tunisia in her presentation, the developer has agreed to withdraw this request. So that provision will remain in the bylaw. Moving on to area 8, where there was a number of concerns identified by council, and if I could characterize them, they were broadly around whether the amount of area attributed to area 8 was sufficient to accommodate the proposed development, ability to ensure adequate views of the public to the waterfront, paired with public access to the waterfront, and also limiting the uses to ensure that the waterfront was animated. Working with the developer, the proposal is, first of all, to change area 8 to make it larger, as was noted earlier, increase the areas of the size of area 8 from 1 hectare to 3 hectares, but also more specifically to create 2 sub areas, 8A and 8B. The objective here is to ensure that the form of character as described in the sub-area plan were achieved through the zoning. Also, there's been stronger language included in the sub-area plan, which is appended as Appendix 1 of the staff report. In regards to Area 8A, the major zoning regulations in this part will be to limit the uses and height adjacent to the waterfront, which is really the objective we're trying to achieve here, which is reflective of the sub-area plan. The height limit will be 9.5 meters, which is approximately 3 stories. There's also be a provision in the zoning, no office uses within 18 meters of the waterfront property line, and also to limit the uses on the ground floor to no more than 25% of the gross leasable area, with the exception being brew houses and restaurants. In anticipation of some questions, let me explain this a little bit more, what we're trying to achieve here. So for example, if the ground floor was 1,000 square feet and there were 4 units in there, each one of those units could be no more than 250 square feet. So the intention is to not create a finite number, because that number will always be the wrong number, but more realistically to just impose a limit, which is the 25%. And also the zoning will have a provision that residential uses will be limited to above the ground floor. In Area 8B, the regulations regarding limiting the uses on the ground floor will be similar. The one major change here, recognizing that as you're moving away from the water, allow for more intensive development. So in this case, the height limit moves from approximately 3 stories up to 6 stories. This image has been referred to already in the parks terms of reference, but all I wanted to point out here was that there will be, as I mentioned, stronger language in the sub-area plan that speaks to the location of the proposed waterfront plaza, the connections of the pathways to the waterfront pathway is noted on that image on your screen, and also the provision of public parking on the street. So the staff recommendation is that the amendments to the sub-area plan as appended to Appendix 1 of the staff report be considered, and equally the amendments to the CD30 zone and Appendix 2 also be considered by committee. Should note that these, should these move forward, these would be incorporated with previous amendments that council has already considered, particularly limiting the maximum non-residential in areas 1 and 2, the Bluffs, to 6,600 square meters. A provision to ensure a limited amount of commercial happens before the residential. So specifically, a maximum of 250 dwelling in areas 4 and 5, which are the landing, unless a building permit has been issued for at least 3,716 square meters of non-residential. Thirdly, the height of apartments is decreased from 12 stories to 6 stories in area 4. And lastly, the height of non-residential has been increased from 6 stories to 12 stories in area 6. So these provisions would all be incorporated into the draft zone that would be provided to council for consideration of an amended first and second reading. That concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. So I'm trying to sort out Area 8A and Area 8B. There was a statement at the beginning of the meeting that there wouldn't be any brew houses or eating and drinking establishments because the 25% limit's too small. But and also your own presentation, the city presentation, was less exact about that. But reading the bottom of page 262 of our 268-page agenda, I note that there is an amendment that says Maximum floor area for any non-residential use excluding brew house and eating and drinking establishment shall be 25% of gross leasable area. So that says to me that the 25% limit does not apply to brew houses and eating and drinking establishments. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Baxter, that's correct.
Okay, good. The other thing is residential in 8 and B. Now, 8A, that's the one nearest the water, is described as building height limit 9.5 meters, I believe. And it's also said that it's a 2-story limit. Is it a 2-story limit or a 3-story limit?
Through the chair to Councillor Baxter, it would be approximately 3 stories if you work out the math with 9.5 meters, which would mean that the ground floor could not be residential because the uses don't permit residential on the ground floor, but the upper 2 stories, for example, could be residential.
Okay.
Yeah, right, you know.
Pardon, Chair, this is Tanisha. May I speak?
Yes, go ahead.
Just to provide clarity through you to Councillor Baxter, it is not our intention to have residential on any of the upper stories in Area 8A, and I don't believe that's actually explicitly in the bylaw for it. Residential is only permitted in Area 8 if it's above the 1st story in Area 8B, and only commercial uses can be on the ground floor story as long as they don't go beyond that 25% of the gross floor area, unless they're a restaurant or a brew house, in which case they can be larger than that 25%. I hope that provides the clarity that you need there.
So it's just, excuse me, just so I understand, Tanisha, no residential at all in Area 8A?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, unfortunately, we don't have the bylaw that is being amended in our package. We just have the amending bylaw, which just says replace section so-and-so with this and replace section so-and-so with this. And it's not clear to me in the amendment where it differentiates between A and B. But taking Tanisha's statement as gospel, I'll be happy to leave it there and then examine the final version of the bylaw when we see it. Does staff have any comment to that?
Through the chair to Councillor Baxter, staff's intention is that if council advances these amendments to the bylaws, that we would incorporate all the changes into bylaws consideration for council's consideration, the next council meeting, the date of which escapes me at the moment, but it would, all these changes would be included in those bylaws.
Okay, so we get a final look at them then, and when amending the bylaw, we can, on that date, we can make any small changes if they're necessary.
Correct.
Thank you. And then the other thing I was looking at is no, that's okay. I think we've dealt with that one. I love the way we're dealing with all my questions as we go along. Yeah. So I think the only other question I have is that the suggestion that the 6,600 square meter limit should be eliminated, and the developers decided not to pursue that. But I ask staff, is there any advantage to the city in increasing that limit, in your opinion?
Through the chair to Councillor Baxter, the reason that we initially recommended to council there be some type of limit in there is because as much as possible, we want to focus the non-residential uses in and around the landing and try to limit the amount of non-residential uses that are starting, if I can use the word, bleeding out of that area into areas 1 and 2.
Yeah, I find myself caught between two stools here in that I agree with that. On the other hand, you know, I would like to see A and B filled with commercial, 8A and 8B, and then I would like it to see it spill over beyond that. So I guess I'll leave it as it is and hope that we've got it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Councillor Logan.
I'll move the recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any discussion on this?
Mr. Chair, at the appropriate moment, can I get clarification from committee on whether the recommendation includes an amendment to the Appendix 2 of a staff report clarifying no residential in Area 8A?
So let's go through the recommendation that I think Councillor Logan just passed, and you can tell me what you think needs to be adjusted. That the Committee of the Whole receive the staff report titled Royal Beach Bylaw Amendments, and the Committee of the Whole consider recommending to Council that official community plan amendment bylaw number 1700-04 2020 Royal Beach be amended to incorporate changes as outlined in Appendix 1 of the staff report, and that Council consider the amendments to Colwood Land Use Bylaw 151 1989 Amendment number 175 Royal Beach Bylaw number 1837 2020 be amended to incorporate changes outlined in Appendix 2 of the staff report. And there's further amendments required, do you think, Mr. Carlson?
I would believe so, because the staff report did not distinguish, make a clear stipulation that there would be no residential in 8A. So if that's committee's desire, I would ask that that be included.
Okay.
I'm happy with that, Councillor Parkinson.
So let's consider that an amendment to the motion. Discussion. I'm going to lower all the hands. Any discussion on the amendment limiting 6,600? See Mayor Martin.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I get frustrated from a standpoint of we are looking at a staff recommendation, and the staff recommendation that's before me is what theoretically the staff is recommending. And now I'm being told that we should be making decisions, and I didn't see the decision point in the report where we were looking to do that. And I guess it's just, it's coming as a surprise to me now, because I felt comfortable with the recommendation, and now I'm having to look back at the report for that decision point, where that decision point is. And so I'll support the motion this evening, because I'm going to need to go back before it comes to council for that. But I would prefer that that actually lands in the recommendations and not outside of them. And I'll leave it with that. That's my comments.
So noted. Councillor Baxter?
I just want to say I support the resolution as it now stands. Well, I support the amendment to the resolution is what I'm saying.
Councillor Kobayashi?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I mean, that was the original understanding. I was surprised when I saw that residential in that 8A, because if you remember the first presentation we had, there was no residential. So I was a bit shocked, and that's why I had my hand up before until Tanisha had clarified that. So,
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. On the amendment, any further discussion? Seeing none, those in opposition to the amendment? Seeing none, the amendment passes. So the main motion as amended, any discussion? Okay, only me. Mr. Carlson, I see that we're looking in area 8B, buildings up to 6 stories, which I think you indicated was an increase from 3 stories. I know that previous discussions, we were worried about sort of how quickly the buildings rose up from the waterfront and the view. Can you maybe comment on this change? I believe it is a change. If you could confirm it's a change to make sure I'm not just talking through my hat. And then why we think 6 stories now is better than 3 stories.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to recall what, and maybe Tanisha, you can help me out here, what the original height limit was in 8 before it was split into 8A and 8B. But leaving that aside for the moment, from staff's perspective, allowing a gradation of heights from 8A with approximately 3 stories up to 6 stories in 8B, given that it's also moving into the even more higher density in area 5, is something that staff can recommend.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion as amended? Okay, seeing none, any in opposition? I have Councillor Day in opposition. That motion passes. Okay, the next meeting of the Committee of the Whole is scheduled for Monday, November 2nd, 2020. Councillor Jansen, moving adjournment, I assume? Okay. Any in opposition to adjourning? Okay, good night all.